Chapter 1022. That thing is so scary. I feel like I'm going to be eaten when I'm being stared at. Is that the legendary cat? Although it's still so small, it looks so scary. Am I going to be eaten? No. I'm still a baby fish, the land is so dangerous. I want to go home. Gina couldn't help but cry again as her shoulders trembled with grievance. What's going on now? Meg looked at the shivering mermaid curled up into a ball in the bathtub with a strange expression. Miss, even though you're a fish, you're still a mermaid. Don't you think it's embarrassing for you to be so scared by a fat orange fish? Ugly duckling, shrink your head back. You're so ugly that you're scaring Big Sister Mermaid. Amy said to Ugly Duckling sternly. Meow. Ugly Duckling looked at Amy aggrievedly as it retracted the sharp claws that it had just revealed. Then, it retracted its feet from the edge of the bathtub and hid behind Amy. Don't poke your head out next time. If you make her cry, I'll have to throw you away. Amy looked at Ugly Duckling and seriously said, I can't afford to lose face like that. Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling nodded its head aggrievedly. I'm relying on my abilities, not my looks. Miss Mermaid, it's all right now. We won't hurt you, Meg said as gently as he could as he looked at the mermaid who had curled up into a ball with great flexibility. After waiting for a while, that scary cat didn't pounce on her, and hearing Meg's gentle voice, Gina hesitated for a moment before carefully moving her fishtail away from her face. She took a peek, and only heaved a sigh of relief after making sure that the scary fellow with golden fur wasn't watching from the side. She carefully swam to the edge of the bathtub, and looked up at Meg with her slightly red eyes filled with sorrow. Lantist had made countless preparations to return to the continent, including cultivating a special breathing method that allowed mermaids to breathe and live on land for a short period of time. Through mimicry, the fishtail could become two legs that could walk upright on land, preserving the information of all the races on the Norland continent. Without a doubt, Gina was the one who did the best among them. She was well versed in the history of the various races. She was one of the mere people who could breathe in the air for the longest time. Her transformed legs were no different from a human's. As long as she could continue to breathe in the air, she could maintain the form of her legs. Hence, when God gave his decree, she shouldered the heavy responsibility of saving Lantist and embarked on the journey to find the chosen one. In the end, he had found the person, but due to the language barrier, he was unable to communicate with him. The biggest problem of Lantist, which had been sealed for 1,000 years, wasn't that their abilities hadn't caught up, but that there was a huge gap in their language. Gina wanted to bang her head on this white and smooth beach and let the waves send her home. She had already used up her last teleportation stone. Even if she wanted to go back, she couldn't. Meg couldn't stand women's tears the most. It wasn't because he was soft-hearted, but because he wanted to slap her. Wasn't it just a language barrier? When he first went to university, he didn't know that his family was very rich. He traveled around 20 countries in Europe on a budget. Even though there was a language barrier, he still crossed mountains and rivers by dancing around. Meg relaxed his body and started his performance. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why did you come to me? Gina was stunned when she saw Meg dancing around with an exaggerated expression. Then, she quickly realized that even though she couldn't understand what the chosen one was saying, she could understand what he meant by looking at his actions and expressions. Gina, she said as clearly as she could while pointing at herself. You are Gina, Meg said as he pointed at Gina. Yes. Gina nodded profusely with a joyful smile on her face. Her expression when she looked at Meg also became a little infatuated. He was indeed the chosen one. He was handsome, had a nice voice, and was so smart. I am Amy, who was at the side, also said as she pointed at herself. Me, Amy, Gina said as she followed. Gina followed. She was overjoyed. This beautiful name should be the name of this cute elf. I am Meg, Meg said as he pointed at himself. Meg. Gina's eyes lit up as she looked at Meg. So, the chosen one's name was Meg. He would become the savior of Lantist and save the Mare people from the darkness of Heidi's world. I am from the sea. Gina then pointed at the water and made a wave with her arm. Then, she pointed at Meg, and said with a determined gaze, I am looking for you. Father, look. Sister Gina really knows you, Amy said in surprise. Although Meg was very satisfied with Gina's learning ability, he really didn't know this mermaid. Even Alex wouldn't have gone to the sea back then, right? Could it be that he was really saved by this mermaid back then? Meg also had some doubts in his heart. After all, this was the only possibility at the moment. Why are you looking for me? Meg then asked while gesticulating. Gina frowned as she looked at him for a while. Then, her eyes lit up as she understood what Meg meant. But, how should she explain the situation? God had given his instructions. He was the one chosen by God to be able to liberate Lantist from the deep sea. She thought anxiously, while Meg and Amy waited quietly. No matter what, the most important thing was to find out why she was here. This silence lasted for about 10 minutes. Just as Amy yawned and wanted to go back to sleep, and Meg was about to go downstairs to prepare the ingredients, Gina's expression finally lit up, and she started her performance. First, she used both hands to carefully hold out something that looked like a flower with a solemn and respectful expression. Then, she waved her hands and drew a square frame around Meg before pointing at Meg heavily with her finger. Then, she used both hands to perform the seaweed dance. Suddenly, a corpse lay in the water and slowly sank to the bottom of the bathtub. Then, she reached out a hand to Meg. Meg and Amy crossed their arms in front of their chests with their left hand and supported their chins with their right hand. Their actions and expressions were in sync as they looked at Gina, who was rolling her eyes and reaching out a hand. They fell into deep thought. I got it. Amy's eyes lit up, and she said with certainty, Sister Gina must be saying that she met Father who fell into the water while holding the flower. She tried her best to save you to the shore and even performed a nice dance for you, but you kicked her into the sea. She won't let you go even if she becomes a ghost. Meg stared. Although this explanation sounds weird, but why does it sound so appropriate? Chapter 10:23. Gina repeated the same action 3 times, but Meg still couldn't figure out what she was trying to express. Instead, Amy's answer became more and more ingrained in his mind. Gina lay at the bottom of the bathtub weakly. She opened her mouth and spat out 2 colorful bubbles. She watched as they floated to the surface, then floated upwards until they hit the ceiling. Meg also chose to give up on this question for now. Instead, he gestured and asked, "Can you come out of the bathtub?" She almost died yesterday due to the lack of water and oxygen. However, she had legs when she first appeared. This made Meg curious if she could walk on land. Gina understood Meg's gesture and nodded. She closed her eyes and meditated for a while. A blue light lit up between her brows, and 1/3 of the water in the bathtub was depleted at a visible speed. All of it was channeled into the blue light between her brows. The blue light faded, and the colorful fishtail disappeared. It turned into 2 long and straight legs. Gina held on to the edge of the bathtub and stood up slowly. The perfect roundness that even the shell couldn't wrap was presented perfectly in Meg's vision. Gina flung her reddish-gold hair behind her back gently and revealed an elegant smile. Meg sniffed. He felt a little unnatural to see such a beauty come out of the bath without warning. However, this made Meg come to a conclusion. This mermaid obviously cultivated some kind of magic. She could make use of a certain amount of seawater to allow herself to breathe in the air. At the same time, she could turn her fishtail into a pair of legs. Meow. Ugly Duckling, who was hiding behind Amy, made a soft sound. Aw. Gina, who wanted to greet him elegantly, was shocked. She jumped up on the spot, opened her legs, and jumped onto Meg's body. She tore open his clothes and buried her head in them. Meg hugged her legs with his hands instinctively, and maintained an unsightly posture with Gina. Amy and Ugly Duckling looked at the two of them who were maintaining a weird posture with their mouths slightly agape. After a moment of silence, Amy picked Ugly Duckling up and walked out of the door quietly. As she walked, she said, "We should give the adults some space." Meg's face immediately darkened. This time, even if he jumped into the Yellow River, he wouldn't be able to clear his name. He was only wearing pajamas when he woke up in the morning. When Gina took off his clothes, she pressed her face against his chest. She was almost naked, except for the two shells in front of her chest and the seaweed around her waist that had been almost completely torn off. With such a graceful body clinging to him, Meg, as a normal man, felt that he was about to raise his head. If not for the fact that he could feel her trembling in fear, Meg would have already thrown her back into the bathtub to calm her down. However, it seemed a little unreasonable to do that now. He could only pull her legs down as he said, "Gina, it's all right now. Ugly Duckling has already gone out." 5 minutes later, Meg finally got Gina, who was wrapped around his body like an octopus, back to the ground. He held his gun quietly. After Gina confirmed that the scary cat had finally left, she patted her chest with lingering fear. That was too scary. Luckily, Mr. Meg protected her. She looked at Meg with gratitude and admiration. Perhaps only a brave person like him would not be afraid of that scary fellow. Meg looked at the scantily clad Gina, and coughed dryly. "Let me help you change your clothes first." After figuring out what Meg meant, Gina looked at her clothes in confusion. Everyone dressed like this at the bottom of the sea. Wasn't it good? If she wore clothes, then it would be inconvenient for her to swim. Why did Mr. Meg want her to change? Meg looked at Gina, who spread her hands out innocently, and could not help but have a headache. Could it be that this girl was not aware of her own figure? Who could stand it if she was dressed like this? Meg thought for a while, and then reached out to turn off the heater at the side. He pressed the quick cooling button and set the temperature. The temperature in the warm bathroom dropped to 0 degrees instantly, and the water on the floor started to freeze. "It's so cold." Gina, who had never felt cold before, shuddered instantly. She felt that she was going to be frozen stiff. Meg took out a bathrobe from the cupboard and draped it over her body. He then raised the temperature by a few degrees. The soft and warm bathrobe draped over her body, and the cold feeling disappeared instantly. "It's so warm and soft when I wear clothes. It's so comfortable." Gina wrapped the bathrobe tightly around her body in surprise. It was the first time she realized that clothes had such a magical effect. "Wait here for a while. I'll go get your clothes." Meg gestured for Gina to wait in the bathroom before he opened the door and walked out. When he walked out, he saw Amy sitting at the staircase with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She was looking at him with a scrutinizing gaze. "I'm going to prepare a suitable set of clothes for her." Meg felt a little guilty for some reason, and he had a headache. He didn't know how Amy would record what happened this morning in her little notebook. Anyway, no matter how it was recorded, he would be dead if it landed in Irina's hands. "Is this water? Why can it see what I look like? Or is there a person like me hiding in here?" When Meg walked in with a sailor suit, a set of school swimwear, and a pair of leather shoes, he saw Gina holding a shower head that she had removed from somewhere and was about to smash the mirror. He quickly reached out to stop her. He had to explain to her that this was a mirror, and what was in the mirror was only her image. There wasn't really a person hiding in it. "These are the clothes for you. Wear this inside, and these 3 outside. If you want to go back into the water, you have to take off the 3 outside and put them aside to prevent them from getting wet." Meg put the clothes on the clothes rack at the side, and then said, "There are pictures of how to put them on here. Just put them on as you see fit." After saying that, Meg looked at Gina, who had already started to remove the shell straps, and quickly went out, closing the door on his way out. This girl is really not particular. As for the school swimwear, Meg was definitely just making it easier for her to get in and out of the bathtub. Yes, that's it. And the sailor suit with black stockings. That's about it. Anyway, it's quite warm in the restaurant. About 10 minutes later, the bathroom door was opened, and Gina walked out awkwardly. She pulled her collar, looked at Meg, and smiled sweetly. Meg's eyes lit up. Her golden red curly hair had already dried and was draped over her back. She was wearing a white sailor suit with a dark blue collar. Under the dark blue skirt was a pair of straight and slender legs, as well as black stockings that just reached her knees. Perfect. Meg nodded with satisfaction. Chapter 10:24. Because body language was very limited, and Gina couldn't understand it immediately, Meg was sure that her target was indeed him. The preparation of ingredients was a very important matter, so Meg let Gina do whatever she wanted while he started to prepare for the opening service later. Gina looked at Ugly Duckling that was glaring at her from the counter. She stuck close to the wall and slowly moved to the entrance of the kitchen. In the end, she still chose to sneak into the kitchen. She felt safer around Meg. What is he doing? Is he practicing his knife skills? Gina looked at Meg, who was busy in the kitchen. The kitchen knife in his hand danced up and down, and all sorts of plants were turned into little particles. It looked rather magical. After standing and watching for a while, Gina still didn't understand what Meg was doing. She looked around, and her gaze landed on the glass fish tank at the side. Her eyes lit up instantly, and she walked over quickly. This little fish seems a little different from the ones in the sea. It looks quite pretty. And this prawn. Although it doesn't look very big, it looks quite pretty. Gina squatted in front of the fish tank with a smile on her face. She stretched out a finger and drew a circle. The fish and prawns in the fish tank also started to move in the direction of the circle she was drawing. Meg raised his head and happened to see this scene. He couldn't help but look surprised. This was much more advanced than training dolphins at the aquarium. After all, dolphins were so intelligent, and the trainers had been using food to train them for a long time. However, Gina had just squatted down and pointed with her finger, and these brainless fish and prawns started to move along with her finger. Looking at Gina's pure smile, Meg was a little dazed. Such a pure smile would probably only appear on the face of someone who had lived in the bottom of the sea and hadn't experienced anything. Phyllis came to the restaurant to help prepare the ingredients. When she saw Gina in a sailor suit squatting in front of the fish tank, she asked doubtfully, "Who is this?" She had never seen this lady before. She didn't look like a customer of the restaurant, and customers weren't allowed to enter the kitchen. It was only 6:00, and the restaurant wasn't even open yet. Could it be that she slept in the restaurant last night? What is her relationship with Mr. Meg? Phyllis's gaze suddenly changed. The style of the clothes she was wearing was very strange. It didn't look like a common style. It was most likely prepared for her by Meg. Then, her gaze fell to her chest, and she suddenly felt a little discouraged. How did it grow? Why were her breasts so big? And mine, big sister Bean Sprout, she's big sister Gina. She's a mermaid, but she can't speak, Amy came forward and said. Hearing the voice, Gina stood up and nodded with a smile. She looked at Phyllis's pointy ears, and her eyes lit up. Another beautiful elf. However, she was a little curious. If Amy was Mr. Meg's daughter, then who was this elf? Could it be Mr. Meg's wife? But she seems to be younger than me. Could it be that Mr. Meg took her when she was younger? Gina restrained her thoughts. Judging from the current situation, Mr. Meg was still a very cultured man. She felt very comfortable around him. Hello. Phyllis also quickly nodded and said. Let's prepare the ingredients for the Yangzhou fried rice first. Meg looked at Phyllis and said naturally. Phyllis was now the main contestant in the preparation of ingredients. Her knife skills, which were enhanced by her talent, made the preparation of ingredients much easier. At least, it freed up a lot of time and energy for Meg. Soon, Gina looked at the various ingredients flying in the air. They were evenly cut into the size of rice grains and landed on various plates. She couldn't close her mouth at all. Mia and the others came to the restaurant one after another. They were all surprised to see Gina. Especially Barbara, who felt like she had met an old friend in a foreign land. She was dancing with joy and talking to Gina passionately. Although in Meg's eyes, their conversation was like pigs talking to ducks, he couldn't resist their high enthusiasm. Even if it was an awkward conversation, it still made them feel like they were close friends. Of course, when Meg asked, Barbara didn't know what they talked about. Anyway, they were super excited. Phyllis brought out the breakfast that Meg had made. Meg gestured to Gina, who was squatting beside the fish tank and playing with the fish and prawns, to eat. Come and have breakfast. Eat. Gina looked at Meg and thought for a while. Then, she reached her hand into the bathtub, grabbed a fish, and was about to put it into her mouth. Wait. Meg quickly stopped her and put the frightened big fish back into her mouth. They were all fish. There was no hurry to fry each other. He pointed outside and said, "Don't eat this. Go outside and eat the breakfast I made." Looking at Gina's confused face, Meg pulled her hand and walked out. This lady had probably never seen cooked food before. However, this way of eating was too gory. It was better to quit. At least the sashimi was sliced. Furthermore, it was a sea fish. Even if she was a mermaid, she would have problems eating freshwater fish raw. Meg pulled Gina out of the kitchen and sat her down at the table. He stuffed a spoon into her hand and pointed at the plate of Yangzhou fried rice in front of her, hinting her to eat it. "It's so beautiful." Gina held the spoon awkwardly. Her eyes lit up instantly as she looked at the fried rice in front of her. It was like the rainbows that could be seen occasionally at the bottom of the sea. That was what her mother told her. Before Atlantis sunk, rainbows could be seen in the sky after the rain. After Atlantis sunk, rainbows could only be seen occasionally when there were huge waves in the ocean currents. That was a color that was rarely seen at the bottom of the sea. And the things on this plate seemed to be made after the rainbows were cut up. Moreover, what surprised her even more was the aroma that greeted her face. She didn't know how to describe this aroma because she had never smelled such an alluring aroma in the underwater world. It was as if there was a small claw scratching her heart, making her want to swallow her saliva uncontrollably. Grumble, the sound of her stomach growling could be heard. Gina blushed. She hadn't eaten for 2 days ever since she lost her water bottle in the desert. Now that she was stimulated by this aroma, her growl was completely out of her control. Eat. Use the spoon to feed the rice into your mouth. Meg used the spoon to demonstrate to Gina. He put a mouthful of fried rice into his mouth and chewed slowly. The others also started to eat. So the people living on land have to use cutlery to eat. But shouldn't food be eaten raw to experience the most delicious taste? Gina found it a little novel. She held the spoon tightly in her right hand and followed suit. She scooped a spoonful of fried rice into her mouth. Chapter 10:25. Wow! Gina's eyes lit up immediately. The wonderful taste blossomed in her mouth. She seemed to see a brilliant rainbow being pulled down from the sky, and the flying kitchen knife sliced it into beautiful pieces. Then, they were stir-fried above the flame, and she ate them in one bite. What a wonderful taste! Even the root of her tongue could feel that kind of happiness. The taste of all the ingredients melted in her mouth and attacked her taste buds continuously. Even after she swallowed, the aroma still filled her mouth. Gina felt that she had opened the door to a new world. Compared to this delicious fried rice, the fresh fish was not even worth mentioning. It's really too delicious. Gina looked at Meg with admiration and a smitten smile. There was actually someone in this world who could make such delicious food. Only the chosen one could do it. Then eat more. If it's not enough, I can make more for you. Meg smiled. He had a little more pity for a foreigner, especially when she did not know how to speak. This kind of loneliness might be even deeper than his. Gina understood Meg's gesture and nodded obediently. She held the spoon and continued to eat the fried rice with a blissful smile on her face. Soon, the plate of Yangzhou fried rice was finished. Meg reached out to stop Gina, who was about to start eating. He asked her to wait for a while before he went into the kitchen to make another plate of fried rice for her. After finishing the 2 plates of Yangzhou fried rice, Gina smiled contentedly. She stood up and bowed to Meg to express her gratitude. Although she was the princess of Lantish, she had received strict training from the high priest since she was young. Hence, she did not enjoy the treatment of a princess, nor did she feel that she should do anything just because she was a princess. According to the ancient teachings of Lantish, she should devote herself to the chosen one who saved her and let her eat such delicious food. Gina was an obedient child, so she decided to follow the ancient teachings. Of course, as a girl, she could not be too anxious and obvious about such things. At least, she had to wait until there were only the 2 of them. After breakfast, Meg sent Amy to school, and the busy business hours began again. Gina stayed in the kitchen obediently. Occasionally, she would help pass a plate or something. However, most of the time, she would squat in a corner and whisper to the fish and shrimps that Meg and the rest could not understand. After the morning service ended, Meg asked everyone to stay behind and held a dialect conference. Everyone tried many languages and accents of different races and finally confirmed that they could not communicate with Gina through language. Everyone left the restaurant. Could it be that she's not from the Norland continent like me? Meg looked at Gina with suspicion in his eyes. If he hadn't inherited Alex's memories, then his communication skills would be similar to Gina's. Gina was a little disappointed, too. She wanted to tell Meg something and ask him to help Lantish, but she didn't know how to express it. Her tribesmen were still waiting for her to return in the dark seabed. That made her feel uneasy and anxious. Meg looked at Gina, who was biting her lips anxiously, and consoled her gently, "Don't worry. If you really came here specially to look for me, I won't chase you away. There will always be a way." Gina met Meg's eyes, and felt much calmer. Suddenly, she felt a little dizzy, and quickly ran upstairs. She could only maintain her human form for 3 hours without replenishing her water supply. Furthermore, she had almost exhausted her spiritual power to maintain her breathing yesterday. Now that she felt a lack of oxygen, she had to return to the water immediately. "Is there too little water?" Meg went into the kitchen, took a bag of sea salt, and followed her upstairs. He knocked on the bathroom door first, but did not hear any response. After hesitating for a while, Meg pushed the door open and went in. There was a neatly folded sailor suit on the clothes rack at the side. In the bathtub, Gina, who was wearing an aqua blue school swimsuit, was lying quietly with her eyes closed. For some reason, she did not transform back into her mermaid form this time. Instead, she had entered a deep sleep state. It is indeed very suitable. Meg's gaze stopped on Gina for a while, and he nodded with satisfaction. Stop, stop, stop. I can't indulge in the disguise game. Meg forcefully shifted his gaze away. Then, he used the sea salt to adjust the concentration of the water in the bathtub to a suitable amount. It's alright to keep a mermaid in the bathtub for a day or two, but it won't work after a long time. It will be very inconvenient for her to bathe or go to the toilet. Meg looked at Gina, who had flipped over comfortably in the bathtub, and turned to walk out of the door. At the same time, he said in his heart, "System, how much is that big fish tank of yours? The kind that can keep mermaids." Host, mermaids are protected animals. They cannot be kept privately. They have to be handed over to the country. Tisk, do you think they are salamanders? The system thinks that as a candidate for the god of cookery, the host's first thought when he sees a mermaid should be how to make a braised mermaid. That is how a qualified god of cookery would think. If the host can make a delicious braised mermaid, the system can provide sufficient ingredients to guarantee a pure wild mermaid. Scram! After some bargaining, Meg spent 2,000 copper coins to buy a big fish tank with automatic water refilling and cleaning functions from the system. It was 3 meters long and 2 meters tall. Even if Gina was in her mermaid form, she could still roll around in the fish tank easily. Because the size of the fish tank was too big, Meg placed it in the spare room beside the master bedroom on the second floor. After the expansion of the shop, the size of the house had doubled. Therefore, there were 2 rooms that Meg had set aside as backup. Now, they came in handy. Before he figured out why Gina was looking for him, he planned to take her in for a while. There was a language barrier, and she couldn't live on land for a long time. If he let her go now, it would be no different from killing her. Meg couldn't do such a thing. In the Food Association's building, the staff were busy. The results of the latest delicious cuisine rankings would be released in 2 days. After 3 months, the delicious cuisine rankings would be released again after a drastic reform. Whether they could produce a ranking that satisfied the customers this time would determine whether the Food Association could continue to be Chaos City's food vein. The vice president hurried into the president's office with a stack of papers. He looked at Robert, who was behind the desk, and said, "President, most of the judges have already concluded the selection for the delicious cuisine rankings this time. 3 independent statistical teams have done the calculations, and the preliminary results are out." "But this ranking, what's wrong with the ranking?" Robert took the stack of statistical reports and looked at them. He was a little surprised, but at the same time, he felt that it was reasonable. "President, does this ranking need to be revised?" "That doesn't seem very good, right?" the vice president said hesitantly. Chapter 10:26. I'll send this month's food review directly back to Rodu. Anyway, I won't be able to find any delicacies that can surprise me like this in Rodu. Why don't I just stay in Chaos City? Maybe that Mr. Mac will come up with some new vegetarian dishes. Derek folded the 2 pages of paper carefully, and then wrapped it in a layer of oilcloth. Finally, he stuffed it into a sealed bamboo tube, and went out to find a consignment office to send it out. This method of using birds to transport items wasn't cheap, but it wasn't difficult for Derek to accept. After all, he could get a generous remuneration for writing a column every month. I wonder what kind of reaction the readers will have after reading this gourmet food review. I'm really looking forward to it. Derek walked out of the consignment office with a smile on his face as he watched a bird fly out of the consignment office. Are we going to continue eating eggplant with garlic sauce tonight? There's nothing good to eat anyway, so let's continue eating eggplant with garlic sauce. Eggplant with garlic sauce was really a dish with magical powers. In a courtyard in the north of the city, Eugene asked Fabian as he bled the chicken in his hand, "Big brother, are we really going to compete with that fellow in roast chicken? Since we already agreed yesterday, we have to go. Otherwise, people might think we're scared," Fabian said with a smile. "Who's scared? We won't be scared. Our skills are passed down from our ancestors. No one in the entire tribe can make roast chicken better than ours. People who have eaten our roast chicken all say it's good. That guy must have seen that our business is good, and he's not convinced, so he's deliberately looking for trouble. When the time comes, we'll go to his restaurant and compete with him, and let him know who's the real king of roast chicken," Eugene said proudly. Fabian reminded him again, "It's one thing to compete, but you're not allowed to create trouble when the time comes. We've finally found a foothold in Chaos City, and have a fixed stall and a small courtyard. If you don't want to go back to hunting, then you'd better abide by the rules here." "Got it." Eugene waved his hand nonchalantly, and continued to slaughter the chicken. "This is the Axayan high that Mr. Meg built for me." Gina, who had slept for 3 hours, was brought to the next room by Meg when she woke up. She looked at the 2-meter-tall, 3-meter-long, and 2-meter-wide fish tank. Her eyes were filled with surprise and gratitude. "This is your temporary residence." Meg was very satisfied with Gina's expression. "Thank you, Mr. Meg." Gina jumped up and hugged Meg. She could not help but wrap her legs around Meg. "You're a mermaid, not an octopus." Meg could not help but grumble in his heart as he finally got the emotional Gina off his body. However, Gina didn't care about Meg's feelings. She took off her clothes, climbed up the ladder, and jumped into the big fish tank with a splash. She began to swim happily. Although it was called a fish tank, it could actually be considered a small swimming pool. Meg stood outside and looked at Gina, who was swimming up and down happily like a fish through the transparent glass. Compared to her clumsy movements on land, she indeed belonged to the sea. "Mr. Meg, do you want to come along?" Gina leaned against the glass and waved at Meg. "I can't stand it, I can't stand it." Meg shook his head and slipped away. "Mr. Meg doesn't like me." Gina watched as Meg disappeared at the door, and felt a little disappointed. No one had told her what love was. In her 18 years of life, saving Lantist was her only mission. However, she knew how to repay. Since Mr. Meg had saved her, and he was going to save Lantist in the future, she was willing to give everything to him. Gina's arrival had some impact on the restaurant. Due to the language barrier, Meg did not let her participate in the daily operations of the restaurant. Instead, he let her do whatever she wanted. Gina, on the other hand, would take the initiative to do some simple things. She liked children and all kinds of aquatic products. She could always play with them easily, even though they did not speak the same language. This was something that surprised Meg. Looking at Gina, who was happily playing with the yarn bridge with Amy, this might be a kind of talent too. However, Gina still had to stay outside the fish tank for 3 hours. When the time was up, she had to return to the fish tank to rest for a while. However, as her magic power recovered, the rest time started to shorten. Sometimes, she only needed to go back to replenish her water supply. After a day of business, Meg was the only one left in the kitchen in the middle of the night. The results of the delicious cuisine rankings will be announced tomorrow. "I wonder if I can get first place in the rankings," Meg muttered to himself softly as he smeared mud on the lotus leaf. The system's mission of dominating the rankings was a little fraudulent. The delicious cuisine rankings had returned to restore credibility. If Mamie's dominated all the rankings, it would seem that there was no credibility at all. Although Meg felt that President Robert was a good person, as the head, if a restaurant really dominated all the rankings, he would definitely step in to balance the rules of the game. Otherwise, the rankings would indeed be a little awkward. Meg had no choice but to leave the outcome to fate. Meg had no control over the results of the rankings. However, apart from the announcement of the rankings tomorrow, there was another matter that Meg had to settle. The battle with the chicken-making orc brothers was not Meg's original intention. However, the system had already announced the mission, so he could only accept it reluctantly. If it was just to defeat them, Meg felt that he could simply throw the chicken into the microwave and make a roast chicken that was more delicious than the orc brothers. However, the system's request was to make a perfect beggar's chicken. This was much more particular. For the past 3 days, he had spent almost all his free time researching how to make a scrumptious beggar's chicken. He had used the recipe and that experience to the extreme, but he still failed every time. After coaxing Amy to sleep, Meg went downstairs quietly to make beggar's chicken. The ingredients were provided by the system. Not to mention that the 3-yellow chicken was reared by the system in the forest troll's sacred land, Angelo Canyon. Just the yellow mud was taken from the depths of the Tatari Desert. The Tatari Desert was the largest desert on the Norland continent. The annual precipitation was almost zero, and it was extremely dry. Even magic beasts could not survive there. It was known as the Land of Death. However, no one would have thought that there was yellow mud that was even more delicate than Ishing's clay under the desert. And this clay, which was enough to make famous potters fight over it, was actually provided by the system to Meg as the outer layer of the beggar's chicken. Regarding this, Meg only wanted to say, "It's just right." The yellow mud was evenly wrapped around the lotus leaves. Then, Meg carefully placed it into the heated oven. The system's improved oven reduced the original 4-hour roasting time to half an hour. Meg washed his hands and set an alarm. Then, he sat at the side and waited quietly. This was the last chance. If he failed again, the time for this mission would be up. That would also mean that the mission was over. Ding! The alarm rang. Meg turned it off, got up, and walked towards the oven. He used a spatula to carefully take out the beggar's chicken, whose shell was already roasted red, from the oven. "Mr. Meg, what are you doing?" Gina appeared at the kitchen door at this moment, rubbing her sleepy eyes. She looked at Meg, puzzled. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1027. Could it be that Mr. Meg is cooking for himself in secret? Gina looked at the yellow mound in front of Meg. It looked a little strange for Meg to be alone in the kitchen in the middle of the night. Meg turned his head in surprise when he heard the voice. He looked at Gina, who was only wearing her school uniform. Although he didn't understand what she was saying, he could roughly guess from her expression. He smiled and pointed at the beggar's chicken that had yet to be opened. "I'm roasting the beggar's chicken." "Beggar's chicken?" Gina repeated in an awkward tone. "Gina, why don't you come and try it?" Meg waved at Gina and made an eating gesture. "You want me to eat it too?" Gina's eyes lit up immediately. After tasting all the delicacies that Meg had made for the past 2 days, her admiration for Meg had reached its peak. She had been watching Meg research for the past few days, and this seemed to be the final product. "This is a new product. Help me try it," Meg explained with a smile. Although he knew that Gina couldn't understand, there was no need for too many words in front of the delicacies. He only needed to present the delicacies. After the beggar's chicken was out of the oven, the yellow mud that had turned red from the roasting quickly cooled down. The delicate and smooth surface had the texture of porcelain, and there were also traces of patterns. It looked as if it was wrapped in a layer of eggshell, forming an oval-shaped egg. "Is this a roasted egg? But what kind of egg is this? Why is it so big?" Gina thought curiously in her heart. Was she going to open this egg and eat it? Meg took a small hammer from the side and knocked lightly in the middle of the beggar's chicken. Following a crisp cracking sound, cracks spread out from the point of impact. The oval-shaped mud shell opened up like a flower, revealing the golden, oily, and shiny beggar's chicken. The rich aroma of the roasted chicken was released immediately, filling the entire kitchen and filling the room with the fragrance. There's such a big bird in this egg. Could it be some kind of magical beast? Gina was a little surprised, but she was soon attracted by the rich fragrance. Her eyes lit up, and she couldn't help but take a deep breath. It smells so good. Unlike the braised chicken's aroma, this aroma was more direct and intense. She could even feel its heat, just like the intense feeling she felt when she first teleported to the desert. But the difference was that the desert brought her a sense of fear and helplessness, while this fragrance made her feel refreshed. The drowsiness from just waking up disappeared in an instant, and her stomach began to rumble. There should be no problem with the color and aroma. Meg looked at the golden beggar's chicken and nodded with satisfaction. The aroma of the chicken was very rich, accompanied by a hint of lotus leaf fragrance. Because it had just come out of the oven, the aroma was still hot. Before it even entered the mouth, it made people want to swallow their saliva. He had eaten beggar's chicken a few times in Changshu, and the taste was not bad. He could be considered a famous chef in the area. But in terms of color and aroma, Meg's beggar's chicken was obviously better than all the beggar's chicken he had eaten in the past, due to the advantage of the ingredients used and his experience of gathering the strengths of 100 different schools of thought. Looking at it this way, the post he made on Weibo back then was not over the top. There was obviously still room for improvement. It was just that these so-called time-honored brands had become stagnant due to excessive commercialization. They were even degenerating day by day and losing their souls. Meg's beggar's chicken was made in between the original method and Jiangsu cuisine. The step of removing the chicken's feathers was completed in advance, but he didn't add any other ingredients to the chicken's stomach. He only added an appropriate amount of spices to preserve the original taste of the chicken. Of course, with just a light tap on the mud shell, it cracked open like a flower. Just this extremely beautiful scene alone would make him an internet celebrity if he was on Earth. The beggar's chicken had already revealed its true colors. The simple and crude method was, of course, to grab a beggar's chicken, pull off a drumstick, and start chewing. Of course, this method of eating looked very satisfying, but it was not suitable for girls. For example, Gina, today's food taster. Eating it this way would ruin her elegant mermaid image. So Meg put down the hammer and turned around to get the knife. Different from Peking duck, slicing beggar's chicken was not so particular. This was because the chicken wings, chicken feet, and even the chicken bones could all be considered delicious. One only needed to slice the roast duck into a size that was suitable for the mouth. If it was too delicate, it would lose its soul. Beggar's chicken, as its name suggested, was originally a delicacy created by beggars. However, it was gradually accepted by the mainstream and became an elegant dish. So if one didn't mind, eating it directly could also be a form of pleasure. Meg turned around to get the knife, but Gina stared at the mud shell in a daze. The outside of the mud shell was bright yellow, but there was a thin layer of greenish-yellow lotus leaves stuck close to the inside. One could feel the crispness of the thin layer, and it looked quite tempting. Can this be eaten? It should be fine to eat a small piece, right? I'll just eat a small piece that's broken. Gina was conflicted in her heart. Then, she reached out to pick up a small piece of the mud shell at the edge of the tray. The thin mud shell was still a little hot to the touch. Gina placed it in front of her nose and sniffed it lightly. The fragrance of the lotus leaves, together with the aroma of the roast chicken, and a unique aroma with a sense of warmth assaulted her nostrils. It was as if a hand had suddenly grabbed her heart. Eat it. A voice rang in her heart, as if guiding her. Crack. Her pearly white teeth bit open the mud shell, making a soft sound as if she was biting into a crispy biscuit. It was a little hard and a little hot. However, Gina's expression lit up immediately. There was a hint of sweetness in the faint fragrance of the lotus leaves. The more she chewed, the more fragrant it became. It was delicious. Meg, who turned around with the knife, was stunned when he saw Gina, who was happily eating a piece of the mud shell. His expression suddenly became strange. "Are you so hungry that you're eating mud?" He didn't know if he should tell her that the mud shell couldn't be eaten, but he was worried that it would hurt her pride if he did. After thinking about it, he silently picked up a piece of the mud shell and took a bite. Crack! Meg took out the intact mud shell from his mouth. His front teeth were almost knocked out. After being roasted in a high-temperature oven, this thing was almost as hard as a rock. Looking at Gina, who was enjoying her meal, Meg couldn't help but be impressed by the mermaid's powerful bite force. Then, he glanced at the other half of the mud shell and put it down. He chewed the mud shell and swallowed it. "It's so hot." Gina suddenly covered her throat and exclaimed in shock. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, Wonderful Book Mobile Version Website, .com. Chapter 1028. Gina's face flushed red immediately. She covered her throat and took 2 steps back. White smoke even rose from her head as if she had swallowed a piece of charcoal. She looked like she was in pain. "Gina, what's wrong? Are you scalded? Or choked?" Meg was shocked too. He quickly put down the knife in his hand and took a glass of ice water. After some thought, he threw a pinch of sea salt into the glass and passed it to Gina. Gulp, gulp. Gina took the glass of water, and finished it in a few gulps. Meg could vaguely hear a sizzling sound as if water had extinguished charcoal. Gina put the glass down and heaved a sigh of relief. Her flushed face was full of sweat, and she looked satisfied. At that moment, she felt as if she had swallowed a ball of fire that was burning down her throat. The seawater stored in her body was almost emptied. Finally, that cup of ice water was like sweet dew from the heavens, extinguishing that ball of fire in an instant. It was as if 100 years had passed in that short moment. That feeling of satisfaction made her feel intoxicated. So good. At that moment, there was only one feeling in her heart. She didn't feel this feeling even when she was at the bottom of the sea and soaking in the hot spring at the mouth of the volcano. She calmed her breathing and calmed herself down. Suddenly, a shocked expression appeared on her face. "I was breathing in air just now." Gina was completely stunned. She tried to take another breath, and her heart started beating rapidly. For so many years, the Lantistians had been unable to solve the problem of how to breathe in air. This was also the shackle that prevented the Lantistians from returning to the mainland. After thousands of years of hard work, the Lantistians found a replacement. That was to let their people cultivate the water storage spell to store seawater that far exceeded their bodies' needs in their bodies. Then, they would complete the breathing process in their bodies. In essence, the Lantistians didn't solve the problem of breathing. Instead, they used a shortcut to allow the merfolk to live on land like humans for a short period of time. However, this limitation was huge. Gina was already the best in Lantist apart from the High Priest, but she could only stay in the air for 3 hours. After that, she had to return to the sea to rest and refill her water. Moreover, during this process, her strength rapidly dropped from level 8 to level 4 in the sea, and as time passed, it continued to drop. If this problem wasn't solved, even if Lantist could return to the mainland, they would only be a weak race that could be bullied by other races. Lantist had worked hard for 1,000 years and tried everything, but to no avail. However, Gina could breathe in the air now. Moreover, after not needing to maintain her breathing, her strength had already recovered to level 8, which was no different from when she was in the sea. Gina's mind was completely blank. She even felt like she was in a trance. Was she still in a dream? She grabbed Meg's hand and pressed it on her face. The warm feeling made her sober up a little. I can feel it. It was true. I can really breathe in the air now. Gina was surprised and happy. She was so excited that she almost jumped up. Meg had a strange expression on his face as he looked at Gina, who looked as if she had just swallowed a piece of charcoal and was now as happy as if she had found money on the ground. What was going on now? Gina, are you all right? Meg asked tentatively. If she became a rash person because she ate a piece of mud casings, then he would be in deep trouble. Thank you, Mr. Meg, Gina said gratefully as she jumped up and hugged Meg. She finally knew why God had chosen Mr. Meg. It was because he had the ability to give Lantist a new life. He was Lantist's savior. What is going on now? Meg raised his hand and looked at Gina, who was wrapped around him like an octopus. He was a little confused. However, he could feel Gina's excitement because her body was so close to him, and her rapid heartbeat was transmitted to him along with her softness. After a while, Meg finally got Gina off his body. Gina pointed at the mud casings with a red face, and gestured as she said, Mr. Meg, can I eat this? She was 100% sure that this change was caused by eating this fiery eggshell. Although she could already breathe a certain amount of air, it was still a little different from breathing in the sea. She wanted to know if eating more eggshell would make her breathing smoother. Actually, this is the dish I wanted you to try, Meg said helplessly as he pointed at the beggar's chicken. It was supposed to be a proper taste test, but it went awry from the moment Gina picked up the mud casings. But although the aroma of the chicken was tempting, Gina's heart was all on the eggshell now. She wanted to know if she could breathe as smoothly as she did at the bottom of the sea after eating a sufficient amount of the eggshell. This was really too important. Meg guessed that Gina liked to eat the hard mud casings because she had pica. After all, there were even people who liked to eat nails and glass in this world. Eating some mud casings didn't seem to be a big deal. Hence, he nodded and said, if you really like it, then take it upstairs for supper later. Try the beggar's chicken first. It will lose its soul when it gets cold. After making a few cuts on the beggar's chicken with a Chinese cleaver, Meg picked up a drumstick and passed it to Gina. The golden crispy chicken skin was still glistening with oil, and the meat was still steaming. The rich aroma of the chicken wafted over, and Gina, who was staring at the eggshell, couldn't help but turn her gaze back. She reached out hesitantly to take the drumstick. Let's eat. Meg made an eating gesture. Gina held the drumstick and took a bite. The crispy chicken skin was gently bitten open, and the tender chicken meat melted in her mouth. The tenderness and freshness of chicken meat bloomed instantly, and the taste buds on the tip of her tongue were immediately disarmed. She didn't have time to chew and didn't have time to gain a foothold on the tip of her tongue before it slid down her throat like a naughty chick. Tender, without any residue, with a unique flavor. This unexpected deliciousness caused Gina to be drawn into the vortex of deliciousness. The smooth and tender chicken meat was like a silent spring rain that gently soothed her throat that had been stimulated by the scalding eggshell earlier. When the chicken meat entered her stomach, it melted into a warm current that seeped into her limbs and bones. If the scalding eggshell earlier was like a hot sauna for her, then the delicious and soft chicken meat was like a massage. It was gentle and comfortable, relaxing her previously tense muscles. Wow! This incredible taste! Gina's face was full of joy. She felt as though she was lying on soft clouds, and her entire body was relaxed. She didn't even notice that her breathing was gradually becoming smoother. You guys are secretly having supper behind my back. An angry voice sounded. Chapter 10:29. Didn't the little girl fall asleep? Meg, who was holding a drumstick and preparing to eat, looked toward the door in surprise. Amy, who was wearing teddy bear pajamas, was standing at the kitchen door. Father, you guys are really too much. How could you secretly eat supper with Sister Gina behind my back? I must remember this. You didn't even call me when there was good food. Amy became more and more aggrieved as she spoke. She walked in and took the drumstick from Meg's hand, then put it into her mouth and took a bite. It's so delicious. Amy's eyes suddenly lit up. Her aggrieved expression turned into pleasant surprise. Her sleepiness disappeared in an instant. She happily chewed on the chicken. Her big blue eyes were sparkling as if she was tasting the most delicious food in the world. She ate one bite after another and enjoyed it very much. Meg looked at Amy dotingly. As expected, a foodie wouldn't miss any supper. System, was the beggar's chicken a success this time? Meg asked in his mind. At that moment, the system's voice sounded. Color, aroma, and taste are all perfect. Regardless of the control of the fire or the control of the seasoning, the host's beggar's chicken has met the requirements you had for the beggar's chicken back then. Congratulations, the host. The mission is a success. You have received a chance to advance to the God of Cookery's lottery. Meg looked at the golden lottery ticket in his mind and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Without entering the test field for the God of Cookery, Meg had successfully made a delicious beggar's chicken in his spare time of 3 days. It could be considered a milestone in his culinary skills. The sense of urgency made him more focused on cooking. The lower tolerance for mistakes allowed him to force himself to improve. Learning how to make beggar's chicken had brought him a lot of inspiration and improvement. Father, don't you love me anymore? Amy chewed on the bones and looked at Meg with an aggrieved expression. How could that be? Father loves Amy the most. Meg quickly shook his head and reached out to touch Amy's head. Did the little girl have a nightmare? Then why didn't you wake me up to eat such delicious roast chicken? Amy felt even more wronged. She looked at Gina and said, You must like Sister Gina more. That's why you only wake her up to eat. Gina, who was chewing on a bone, looked at Amy in confusion. She did not know what she was talking about, so she continued to grind her teeth with the bone. Meg didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect the little one to be unhappy because of this. He smiled and said, This is a new product that I've been researching these days. When we were at the market that day, didn't we say that we were going to have a roast chicken duel? Tomorrow is the day of the duel, so Father stayed up all night to roast chicken. Sister Gina is the same as you. She woke up on her own and came downstairs after hearing the noise. Father invited her to try out the new product, so we're not secretly having supper behind Amy's back. Instead, we're preparing to make a delicious roast chicken for Amy so that she can eat the most delicious food. Really? Amy was a little happier when she heard that. Of course it's true. Meg smiled and handed over a chicken wing. Amy took the chicken wing happily and nodded as she ate. I believe in Father. Meg secretly wiped his sweat. Luckily, the little one only needed a chicken wing to appease her. Otherwise, if word got out that a man and a woman were eating chicken in the kitchen in the middle of the night, it would be hard to explain. While Gina and Amy ate happily, Meg also picked up a chicken wing to taste. The roast chicken wing was a little crispy, but the texture was much smoother than the fried chicken. The fragrance of the lotus leaf neutralized the greasy feeling perfectly, making the roast chicken delicious but not greasy. The crispy chicken skin and tender flesh gave Mag quite a bit of finesse in the texture of the chicken. The more he chewed on the cracked chicken bones, the more fragrant they became. Unknowingly, the entire chicken wing was in his stomach, and Meg didn't even spit out the bones. The 3 yellow chicken that was raised in the Ongoro Canyon, the sacred land of the Ongoro tribe, grew up eating tree seeds. The chicken meat was fat and tender, and the texture was excellent. Perhaps it was because of the system's so-called magnetic field effect, but the chicken meat was rich in nutrients and had a very significant effect on removing moisture. This can be called a real beggar's chicken. Meg nodded with satisfaction. In comparison, the beggar's chicken that he had eaten a few years ago was simply a weak chicken. The roast chicken was quickly devoured by the 3 of them, but they still felt like they hadn't had enough yet. Can I eat this? Gina asked hesitantly as she pointed at the mud casing. Can this eggshell be eaten? Amy asked curiously. She picked up a piece of the mud casing and put it in her mouth to bite it. Then, she quickly took it out and looked at the 2 marks left on it. She shook her head and said, Sister Gina, you can't bite through this. Gina, if you're still not full, I can make some other food for you. Meg also pointed at the fridge at the side. Gina almost choked to death when she ate this mud casing just now. I want to eat this, Gina said firmly as she pointed at the mud casing. Seeing Gina's insistence, Meg hesitated for a while before nodding. All right then, but you have to take smaller bites. Don't choke again. Thank you, Mr. Meg. Gina was elated, and wanted to give Meg an octopus hug again. However, Meg avoided it easily this time. The child was still around, and it wasn't good to hug. This kind of thing had to be done in private. Gina carried the mud casing upstairs happily. Meg tidied up the kitchen, and also brought Amy upstairs to sleep. Meow, Ugly Duckling lay on the edge of the bed and looked at the father and daughter who came in with hidden bitterness. Ugly Duckling, I'm thinking of you losing weight. Don't even think about supper. You'll get fat if you eat it. Amy rubbed Ugly Duckling's chubby face, and smilingly said, only people like us who don't get fat can eat supper without worry. Heart-wrenching, Ugly Duckling leaned back helplessly with its limbs in the air. It didn't want to say anything. Good night, Father. Amy climbed onto the bed by herself and gently kicked Ugly Duckling, which was lying on the cup, to the end of the bed. Then, she crawled under the blankets and told Meg that she was going to sleep before closing her eyes immediately. Meg lay on the bed and looked at the prize-will opportunity in his mind. He hesitated for a while, and decided to put this opportunity aside for the time being. He would make plans after the results of the delicious cuisine rankings were out the next day. He was already prepared for the worst. If he kept this opportunity, it would at least be a bargaining chip. Have you heard? The new delicious cuisine rankings will be announced at 11 a.m. today. I've heard about it long ago. I even know that the Food Association has abandoned the previous voting and ranking system, and changed it to a ranking by a panel of mysterious experts. This sounds quite reliable. Perhaps the days of looking for delicacies based on the rankings will come again. That might not be the case. The delicious cuisine rankings have already disappointed me for many years. I hope it won't be the same this time. This morning, many people in Chaos City were already discussing the upcoming delicious cuisine rankings. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, the mobile version of the wonderful book, .com. Chapter 10:30. It's been 4 hours. I'm only breathing air without absorbing any seawater, and I still don't feel any difficulty in breathing. That chicken and that magical eggshell that I ate last night really gave me the ability to breathe on land. My God! This is too magical. Beside the big fish tank, Gina exclaimed softly in surprise. The problem that had troubled Lantis for thousands of years, the curse that imprisoned the merfolk in the deep sea forever, was easily solved just like that. If she hadn't experienced all of this personally, she definitely wouldn't have believed that all of this was just a chicken. There was no cumbersome cultivation, no painful process. She just happily ate a chicken, and she obtained the ability to breathe on land. God, thank you for guiding me to the person you've chosen, removing the curse on me, and pointing a bright path for Lantist. I will give everything to serve the spokesperson you've chosen. Gina clasped her hands in front of her chest, and said sincerely. In the depths of the boundless sea realm, where the sun couldn't shine, it was still dark. Only the glow of the gemstones illuminated some places. At the altar in the middle, the high priest in a black robe sat cross-legged in the middle of the altar. 6 glowing gemstones illuminated the altar. In front of the high priest, there was a ball of golden red flame that was dancing slowly and burning brightly. High priest, Gina's flame of life hasn't extinguished. It's getting brighter and brighter, just like when she was in Lantist. Could it be that she has found the chosen one? A middle-aged merfolk in a golden robe with a crown on his head was rather agitated. Gina is fine. That's great, a mermaid who was also dressed in luxurious clothes said with a choked voice. She was also overjoyed. If Gina didn't return to the sea realm, she should have met the chosen one and removed the curse. Otherwise, the merfolk wouldn't have been able to maintain their peak power on land. The high priest's hoarse voice sounded, and there was also excitement in his voice. That's great. The merfolk surrounding the altar were overjoyed, and appeared rather excited. But, Princess Gina has already used up all the teleportation stones. Then, how are we going to get to the chosen one? If we don't see him, we won't be able to remove the curse, a merfolk said softly. The surroundings of the altar gradually quieted down, and the Murlocs also realized this problem. Lantist was trapped at the bottom of the sea, thousands of meters below the surface. That chosen one was just a human, and it was impossible for him to come to such a depth to save them. If Gina has already seen him, she will definitely think of a way to bring him back. This is her mission, and also what she has been working hard for the past 18 years. She is the best seeker. The high priest's voice echoed throughout Lantist. It feels so good to breathe in the air now. It's just like breathing in the sea. Furthermore, I can eat Mr. Meg's delicacies every day and see his handsome face. It's so comfortable that I don't want to go back to Lantist anymore. Mr. Meg is a human, and can't breathe underwater. If we bring him back to Lantist, he will definitely drown. No. I can't let Mr. Meg drown. If he drowns, what am I going to do? But if I don't bring him back, what will happen to my clansmen? Gina thought to herself as she ate her Yongzhou fried rice. However, she couldn't think of a good solution no matter how hard she racked her brain. Since there's no solution, then let's just enjoy it. However, she was relieved very quickly, and immersed herself in the delicacies in front of her wholeheartedly. Mr. Meg, can you let me do something? Gina asked as she gestured to the ladies who were busy preparing for the opening of the restaurant after breakfast, and pulled Meg back. These beautiful ladies were very hardworking. Mr. Meg had done so many things for her, and even let her stay here and cook all kinds of delicacies for her. How could she just stay here and do nothing? Hence, she wanted to do something for the restaurant too. If you want to help. Meg looked at Gina. Due to the language barrier, she couldn't do the job of serving customers. Furthermore, she was used to eating raw food, so she obviously didn't have the talent and ability to cook. After thinking about it, Meg decided to let Gina be in charge of comforting the children of the customers who came to the restaurant. There were many rules in Mamie Restaurant, and they created a comfortable dining environment for the customers. However, the rules were completely incomprehensible to the ignorant children. As the number of customers increased, the noisy and crying children affected the dining environment, and it became a headache for him. Because of Amy, he started to understand the difficulties of parents. The rule of not allowing children in was too cold-blooded and unreasonable. He couldn't make up his mind. Gina's volunteer gave Meg a new idea. Play with the children. It took Gina a while to understand what Meg meant. She then nodded with a smile. I love children the most. I believe I can complete the task very well. Then I'll leave it to you, Meg said with a smile. Amy went to class at the magic potion shop by herself, and the restaurant officially opened for business. Due to the magical beauty effect of the tofu pudding, many housewives came to line up outside the restaurant early in the morning. To them, making themselves look younger and prettier was the key to keeping the stinky men who were gradually not coming home. The beauty effect of the tofu pudding was very obvious, and it gave many young women a second spring. Therefore, it became more and more famous in the circle of upper-class ladies. Young women often had children to accompany them, and they even had to carry them in their arms. How could they bear to leave them at home? Therefore, once the restaurant opened for business, children started crying very quickly. Moreover, the crying seemed to be contagious. 1, 2, 2, and 4. For a moment, the restaurant was filled with crying noises. Although the customers didn't say anything, there was some displeasure on their faces. They wanted to eat some good food quietly early in the morning and start the day happily. However, when they heard the ear-piercing crying, they became a little irritated. They couldn't even calm down and enjoy the delicious food in front of them. The mothers who took care of their children apologized apologetically and anxiously coaxed their children. However, the children seemed to be competing with their voices. One was crying louder than the other, and they didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Little guy, look at the little fish's somersault. Just then, Gina walked out of the kitchen with a small basin. There was a red carp in the basin. She smiled as she walked to the front of a crying child. With a slight twist of her finger, the red carp in the basin leaped out of the water. It spun in the air and fell back into the basin. There wasn't a single splash. The child stopped crying immediately. He stared at the red carp in the basin with teary eyes as if he had seen something unbelievable. Another one. Gina twisted her finger again. The red carp leaped high again, somersaulted, and fell back into the basin. Hee hee. The child laughed happily and even clapped his little hands. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 1031. Gina's performance was very successful. The children's cries disappeared very quickly, and turned into melodious laughter that sounded like silver bells. The customers' furrowed brows relaxed, and their moods lightened up as they listened to the children's laughter. Of course, many customers were also attracted by Gina's miraculous performance. They looked at the ordinary-looking red carp, but it was actually able to perform all kinds of actions under her command. It was as though it had intelligence, and it was very pleasing to the eyes. I am indeed a genius. Meg smiled as he looked at Gina, who made the children smile. It was very important to enhance the customer's dining experience, and it was also important to satisfy the customers. As a perfectionist, he couldn't accept having children crying around him during the meal. Now, it was great. Gina used her almost silent performance to make the children smile, and the occasional laughter made people smile uncontrollably. The mothers who brought their children thanked Gina gratefully. They naturally knew the rules of Mamis. If their children cried every time they came, they would be too embarrassed to bring them the next time. They could only let the children stay in the carriage and leave after eating quickly. However, if they did that, they wouldn't be able to enjoy the food properly. However, it was great now. This beautiful lady used a little magic trick to make the children smile and become obedient. Thank you, Mr. Meg. After the morning service ended, Gina looked at Meg and said word by word. Then, she gave him a big hug with a smile on her face. This was the phrase she heard the most this morning. She understood the meaning of these 3 words from the faces of those young mothers, and it made her feel an unprecedented sense of accomplishment. It turned out that doing such a simple thing could help so many people. The feeling of being thanked made her feel very magical. There was a very long period of time when she felt that she was just a tool that was born to remove the curse of Lantis. For 18 years, she only lived to remove the curse. Even her father never showed any concern for her. Even when they met, they only talked about curses and cultivation. The people respected her, but she knew that it was only because she carried the heavy responsibility of saving Lantis. Only her mother would show some concern for her when no one else was around. But today, she felt the heartfelt gratitude of those young mothers, as well as the appreciative and approving gazes of those guests. All of this was because she had used a little bit of her talent to guide Xiaoyu to play a little trick. This sense of accomplishment made her feel touched and excited. In her opinion, all of this was a gift from Meg. He let her know that other than removing the curse, he could also do other things and gain the recognition of others. Everyone who was cleaning up the restaurant looked at Gina, who was hugging Meg tightly. Their eyes widened. Sister Gina is hugging Uncle Meg. That seems to be a dangerous action. Anna stood in the corner, deep in thought. What is Gina doing? Yabamiya asked in confusion. Maybe she likes him, Elizabeth said calmly. How can you act so quickly? Barbara was astonished. Yeah, how can she be so fast? I was the one who... Phyllis clenched her fists. That's weird. I'm the most good-looking one. Why do all the ladies like him? Could it be that this world has changed? Shirley propped her chin on her hand and looked at Mag with a perplexed expression. You're welcome, you're welcome. Meg held down Gina's leg that was about to lift up carefully, and shook his head with a smile as he pried her hands away from him. He could feel Gina's joy and happiness, but for his own happiness, he had to reject the octopus's hug in front of everyone. Moreover, he didn't understand why Gina was thanking him. He should be the one thanking her. After all, he used her labor for free. But why did she look like she was being sold, and was even counting the money for him happily? He would really feel guilty if he did that. Meg finally separated from Gina, who had calmed down, and coughed dryly. He looked at everyone with a righteous expression and said, Gina wanted to express her joy for her new job. Because of the language barrier, she could only use body language to express it. There's actually nothing between us. Everyone rolled their eyes in unison. Clearly, they didn't believe him. Uncle Meg, is this what you mean by trying to cover it up? Anna asked curiously. You little brat, you've even learned to use idioms. Meg raised his eyebrows. Moreover, it was inexplicably appropriate. All right, we're done. Let's take a rest. Meg also felt that he was making things worse. There was nothing at first, but now it seemed like there was something. He glanced at the clock on the wall, and then at Gina, and said, Oh yeah, Gina, you should be resting in the fish tank, right? It's been 3 hours. Gina shook her head. She used her finger to point at the air, and then at her nose. She took a deep breath and revealed a sweet and comfortable smile. You can breathe the air now. Meg was shocked. Yes. Gina nodded. That's good. Meg felt a little disappointed for some reason. He had grasped Gina's living habits these few days. She had to return to the bathtub to rest for a while after staying outside the fish tank for 3 hours before coming out again. This was a very interesting habit. It made Meg feel like he was rearing a mermaid. But now, she could actually breathe the air. This meant that she didn't have to return to the fish tank anymore. That's great. Gina can go out and play now. She doesn't have to worry about breathing anymore. Yabamiya smiled happily. They didn't dare to bring Gina out these few days because she needed to replenish the seawater. But now, they didn't have to worry about this anymore. Why can you breathe the air all of a sudden? Elizabeth asked as she looked at Gina, puzzled. She had once seen an incomplete record of the mermaid tribe on a stone tablet in the Frost Dragon tribe's forbidden area. There was a paragraph that said that they couldn't breathe the air, and could only live at the bottom of the sea. It was extremely rare to see them. Since Gina was from the mermaid tribe, it was already very unusual for her to appear in Mamie's. She couldn't understand why she could breathe the air all of a sudden. Egg and chicken. Eat, Gina said as she gestured. Finally, she pointed at Meg with a blissful expression. Everyone looked at Meg with a strange expression. Did Uncle Meg do something strange to Sister Gina? Anna asked curiously. Chapter 1032. Meg was speechless. What the hell was this lady describing? It was clearly just a pure chicken dinner, all right. To prevent this brainless mermaid from making things worse, Meg quickly explained, Gina should be talking about the new dish I plan to release tonight, the beggar's chicken. She happened to come downstairs when I was making the new dish last night, so I asked her to try it. I didn't expect her to gain the ability to breathe after eating the beggar's chicken. I see. Boss, are you going to release a new dish again? That's great. Yabamiya's eyes lit up, and she looked excited. Everyone's eyes also lit up. Whenever Meg released a new dish, it meant that they would be able to taste another type of delicious food. But what kind of chicken was the beggar's chicken? After eating it, Gina could actually breathe on land. That was too miraculous. The beggar's chicken is a type of roasted chicken. If nothing goes wrong, 2 orcs will challenge me at noon today. You will know then, Meg said with a smile when he saw everyone's curiosity. I believe that it will definitely be a new type of delicacy. Yabamiya said confidently. Oh yes, Gina. Since you can already breathe, do you want to go to the ice cream shop with us to play? Mia looked at Gina and gestured. Over the past 2 days, everyone had been able to use hand gestures to carry out simple conversations with Gina. Go out. Gina's eyes lit up. Although she had seen customers from various races today, she hadn't left the restaurant because she was afraid of the lack of oxygen. She had only stood at the door and the window to look at the world from afar. Now that Mia said she was going to take her out, she was naturally happy and excited. Can I? However, she didn't rush to agree. Instead, she looked at Meg. Go ahead. It's good to go out for a walk. Meg nodded with a smile. He had been so busy making the beggar's chicken that he didn't have time to take care of Gina. He had forgotten to take her out for a walk. Mr. Meg, do you want to go with us? Gina gestured again. Then I'll go out for a walk too. Meg thought for a while and nodded. Making beggar's chicken at a high intensity for the past 2 days had made him a little tense. It would be good to go out and relax. Except for Phyllis, who chose to stay behind to continue cooking, everyone else went out. Before they went out, Meg specially gave Gina a long and wide woolen coat with extra fleece. The heavy snow from a few days ago had almost melted. Only a layer of white mixed with snow and ice could be seen on the roof, exuding a sense of coldness. The ground was also wet. Fortunately, the sun was not bad today. It was warm and had driven away a lot of the chill. Gina looked around curiously. There were all kinds of shops along the street, and the square was filled with all kinds of plants. Everything was so novel and interesting. This was a scene that couldn't be seen in Lantist. There was a lively atmosphere everywhere. Everyone had smiles on their faces, as if they were happy about something. Is that white snow? Gina quickly discovered the white accumulated snow on the roof, and was pleasantly surprised. Her mother had once told her about snow when she was young. It was something that could only be seen on the continent. It was like a feather that floated down from the sky. It was very beautiful. That is snow. It has almost melted. However, winter is getting cold so early this year. There will definitely be a few more heavy snowfalls, Yabamiya said with a smile. Will it snow again? Gina didn't understand completely, but she understood the last half of the sentence. The smile on her face became even brighter. If she could see snow, then she would be the only mermaid in Atlantis who had seen snow. That was too blissful. When it snows again, we can build a snowman together and have a snowball fight. It will be so fun. Gina, you live at the bottom of the sea. You definitely haven't seen snow before, right? Let me tell you. The ladies chatted and laughed along the way, attracting a lot of attention. Yabamiya, Elizabeth, Barbara, Shirley, and Gina were all beautiful in their own way. Any one of them would attract a lot of attention when they walked on the street. Now that they were gathered together, they became a natural spotlight that attracted the attention of almost the entire street. Under the spotlight, all the details would be magnified. Not to mention the man who was especially eye-catching. Meg, who was surrounded by a group of beauties, was like a wooden club in a bouquet of beautiful flowers. He was an eyesore no matter how one looked at him, especially the men. Sweet type, icy beauty, lowly type, mature sister type, pure type. Oh my god. Is he collecting stamps? Fuck. Who can stand this? What an enviable winner in life. The men looked at Meg with envy, jealousy, and hatred. Are you envious? A young lady asked the man beside her who couldn't take his eyes off him. Envious. That man nodded subconsciously. Smack. The sound of a slap was heard. Are you still envious? No. I'm not envious, smack, smack. You dare to lie to me. Then, are you envious? Smack, smack, smack. You still dare to be envious. I'm not envious. I'm not envious. My wife is the prettiest. A certain man covered his face and wanted to cry. Women were indeed scary. Weren't they gentle and lovely kittens before marriage? Feeling the anger and jealousy of the entire street, Meg's expression didn't change. He had seen all kinds of situations. In the past, when he went out, he was always accompanied by beautiful female companions. He liked the feeling of not being able to get rid of him even though you didn't like him. It felt so good. There's going to be a new gourmet food ranking today. Will Mamis be on it? Anna asked curiously when they passed by the Food Association's ranking. Of course. Boss's food is so delicious. It would be strange if we didn't make it on the ranking, Yabamiya said confidently. There are 6 rankings here. I wonder how many will make it on, Shirley said curiously. While the ladies were discussing, only Meg smiled and didn't say anything. His goal wasn't to make it on a few rankings, but to dominate the rankings. After sitting in the ice cream shop for a while, Meg met Curtis and Kyle. Kyle, who had been eating red braised pork for a few days, had recovered a lot. His pale skin started to turn green, and he looked a little like an orc. He was also in good spirits. Other than getting tired easily, he wasn't much different from a normal child. Curtis and his son expressed their sincere gratitude to Meg. The child's condition made Meg feel relieved. At the same time, he felt a sense of responsibility for his career. Although he was only a chef, he might become a doctor at some point in time. It was a miraculous change in identity, all because of a dish. After sitting in the ice cream shop for a while, he brought Gina around the Aden Square. When they passed by the gourmet food ranking, the countdown started. Meg was a little surprised. Looking at the 60-second countdown on the screen, he couldn't help but stop in his tracks. What a coincidence. Let's take a look then. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 1033. In order to restore its credibility and make the delicious cuisine rankings the vein of Chaos City's food, the Food Association had shown its sincerity this time. They had invited a group of renowned culinary gurus and well-known critics to be the judges. They used complete anonymity to rank the dishes and come up with the final list. Furthermore, other than the overall restaurant rankings, there were also 5 categories of rankings: meat, seafood, soup, vegetarian, and snacks. They included almost all types of delicacies, and the categories made it easier to find delicacies. The innovative ranking method and mysterious judges' ratings had piqued the curiosity of the customers. Every customer had a dish that was ranked first in their heart, so it was inevitable that they would be curious about which dish would be ranked first in each category. Was it the dish in their heart? Of course, the people in the front row were mostly the owners of the various restaurants. They were looking at the countdown on the big screen nervously. The delicious cuisine rankings had an immediate impact on customer traffic. If they could get a good ranking on this ranking, they wouldn't have to worry about business for a while. If you ask me, Dukas Restaurant's roast pig must be number 1 on the meat rankings. Is there anything more delicious than roast pig? A greasy middle-aged man said with a smile. As a roast pig fanatic, Dukas Restaurant's roast pig had become an indispensable delicacy in his life. Furthermore, as a veteran foodie, Dukas Restaurant had always been number 1 on the delicious cuisine rankings for the past 10 years. It had never been surpassed or challenged by anyone. Even though the delicious cuisine rankings had been revised and innovated, he still firmly believed that Dukas Restaurant's roast pig was unrivaled in the meat category. I can't say for other things, but when it comes to soup, Sith Restaurant's freshwater seafood soup is definitely number 1. Fresh freshwater seafood is boiled into a pot of thick soup with the owner's secret condiments. The taste is simply mesmerizing. I recommend Decca Restaurant's stir-fried river prawns for seafood. Even the shell is crispy when it's stir-fried. The more you chew it, the tastier it gets. Coupled with a good pot of wine, you won't be able to find another restaurant like it. The diners were promoting their favorite dishes with a smile, showing off a little bit. They were just waiting for the ranking list to come out. If the dish they mentioned ranked first, they would receive a wave of admiring gazes. Harrison and George squeezed to the front, and said with a chuckle, "If those judges' mouths were normal, I think it would be normal if Mamie's dominated the rankings. Isn't it a little too cruel to slaughter them all?" George scratched his head. Harrison thought for a moment, and nodded. "That's true. We still have to leave some leeway for people. Big brother, we're not running a shop in the Aiden Square. Why are we looking at this?" Eugene, who was carrying a large backpack, asked Fabian in confusion. "Although we haven't opened a shop here yet, this is our goal." Fabian looked at the ranking list, and his eyes lit up. He continued, "The Aiden Square is the most prosperous place in Chaos City with the most delicacies. We have to establish a foothold in the market first. Our next goal is to have our own restaurant in the Aiden Square, and let more customers eat our roast chicken." "So that more customers can eat our roast chicken?" Eugene nodded thoughtfully. After a while, he curiously asked, "Big brother, do you think that Meg's restaurant we're going to today will be on the list?" "Perhaps. The owner of that restaurant seems to be quite confident," Fabian said after thinking for a moment. Eugene shook his head with certainty, and said, "I don't believe that fellow can make delicious food. In my opinion, his restaurant definitely won't make it on the list." "What's this shiny thing?" Gina, on the other hand, was looking at the magic screen curiously. Her eyes were filled with curiosity as she looked at the numbers flashing on it. However, when she saw so many people staring at it, and even Mr. Meg stopped in his tracks, she guessed that it must be something very important. Meg heard everyone's discussion. Many of them were Mamie's regulars, who were pushing Mamie's delicacies confidently. However, he didn't say a word. Instead, he stared at the numbers that kept flashing. He hadn't felt this kind of nervousness for a long time since his TOEFL results came out. 10, 9, 8, the countdown was getting closer and closer, and the surroundings of the screen were completely silent. Everyone held their breaths and stared at the magic screen with their eyes wide open, waiting for the moment of a miracle. Delicious cuisine rankings, meat rankings, first place, red braised pork, Mamie's. Second place, Peking duck, Mamie's. Third place, black pepper steak, Mamie's. Fourth place, roast suckling pig, Dukas restaurant. When the first category rankings came out, everyone was shocked speechless when they saw Mamie's 3 consecutive dishes neatly arranged. Dukas restaurant's most famous roast suckling pig was actually pushed to 4th place by 3 dishes from the same restaurant. What was going on? Fuck, is there an inside story? Where did Mamie's come from? How could there be 3 dishes that are more delicious than roast suckling pig? Dunn couldn't help but curse with a look of ridicule. Mamie's is awesome. Harrison said with a satisfied smile, which made many of Mamie's regulars smile. This ranking gave them a special sense of comfort. Looking at the astonished and ridiculous expressions of the people around him, he felt even more proud and smug. I have to say, these judges are quite professional. Meg's eyes also lit up slightly, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The meat rankings stayed in the center of the screen for about 10 seconds, and then shrank to the bottom right of the magic screen. Then, the seafood rankings were announced. Delicious cuisine rankings, seafood rankings first place, spicy grilled fish, Mamie's. Second place, stir-fried river prawns, Decca restaurant. Third place. The first place is still Mamie's. Once the seafood rankings were released, it caused another uproar. Everyone looked at the names of the restaurants at the top of the rankings, and felt that it was a little dazzling. Delicious cuisine rankings, soup rankings first place, braised chicken soup, Mamie's. Delicious cuisine rankings, vegetarian dishes rankings first place, eggplant with garlic sauce, Mamie's. Delicious cuisine rankings, snack rankings first place, savory tofu pudding and sweet tofu pudding, Mamie's. Third place, beef kebab, Mamie's. Fourth place, stinky tofu, Mamie's. Fifth place. Delicious cuisine rankings first place, Mamie's. Second place, Dukas restaurant. Chapter 1034. There was complete silence in front of the magic screen. Everyone looked up at the row of words at the top, shocked speechless. From the category rankings to the overall rankings, this restaurant named Mamie's dominated the first place of all the rankings. Yes, it dominated the rankings. It dominated the rankings mercilessly. Even the category rankings did not leave any chance for the other restaurants. Mamie's is awesome. Mr. Mac, you're awesome. Harrison's mouth was agape with shock. This is really, not leaving any chance for survival. George nodded with a similar look of shock. In their hearts, this ranking was completely credible because they had all tasted the dishes on the rankings. It was not unreasonable for them to dominate the rankings, but they deserved it. However, when the rankings were released one after another, and every ranking was at the top, even if they had expected it, they were still shocked. Eugene nudged Fabian with his elbow and swallowed his saliva. Brother, what is the name of the restaurant that we are going to challenge today? Mamie. Restaurant. Fabian also swallowed his saliva and squeezed the words out of his throat with some difficulty. Is it those 4 words? Eugene asked as he pointed at Mamie's that was hanging high. If there is no other restaurant in the Aden Square, it should be. Fabian nodded, feeling a little confused. What was going on? They were here to challenge today, but before they even reached their destination, they saw the restaurant that they were going to challenge dominating the delicious cuisine rankings. One dominating meant that there were 6 rankings, and they were all at the top. If they looked at the rankings together, it would be like putting a menu on top. At a glance, they were all Mamie's. This result made many people feel very uncomfortable. Apart from the brothers Eugene and Fabian, there were also those restaurant owners who were looking forward to it, as well as the diners who had high hopes for their favorite restaurant. Could this Mamie's be the exclusive sponsor of this delicious cuisine rankings? Why are they all number 1? Yeah, isn't this nonsense? Even if they really bribed them, they shouldn't go overboard, right? I was looking forward to it at first, but now I feel that the delicious cuisine rankings has completely become a money-making tool. It has no reference value at all. The onlookers came back to their senses. Many of them began to express the anger in their hearts. They felt like they had been toyed with. President Robert, you're indeed a bold man. I like you. Meg looked at the glittering words, Amy's, on the list, and the smile on his face was as bright as a flower. As for those sarcastic remarks, he didn't take them to heart, because the system had already begun to complete the mission. That was the most important thing. Congratulations, host. You've completed the mission of dominating all 6 rankings. Mamie's reputation will rise again, and become one of the most famous restaurants in Chaos City. Mission reward, a chance to use the God of Cooking wheel has been issued. The host can choose to use it or store it. After accumulating 3 chances to use the wheel, the host can exchange for a specific recipe. The system's voice rang out, accompanied by the blooming of fireworks. Just leave it there for now. We'll talk about it when we get back. Mag said casually as he was in a good mood. He pulled Gina out of the crowd, and walked towards the restaurant. As a pragmatist, since he had already completed the mission of dominating the rankings, there was no need for him to continue listening to those unconvinced voices. The most important thing was to go back and prepare the ingredients for the lunch service. Of course, if there was time, Meg would definitely stay and listen for a while more. After all, such a scene could easily make one happy. The release of the new delicious cuisine rankings had already attracted a lot of attention, and Mamie's terrifying feat of dominating all 6 rankings quickly caused quite a stir in Chaos City. This was originally just a grand occasion in the foodie circle, but because of the exaggerated dominating of the rankings, it successfully turned into a national entertainment event. The news of Mamie's dominating the delicious cuisine rankings also spread like wildfire. It was as though someone had really seen the boss of Mamie's personally hand a huge box of money to the president of the Food Association. This made the onlookers' impression of Mamie's drop drastically. Regarding this, the people who had been to Mamie's were naturally unconvinced. They fought for Mamie's with all their might. At least, the public opinion was not one-sided. Furthermore, the news that the boss of Mamie's had won the best chef in the royal banquet at the Roth Empire's King's birthday banquet, and had defeated the head chef of Duca's restaurant in a chef's duel also spread like wildfire, and slowly changed the public opinion. In the Food Association's building, the staff were all rather nervous. They were rushing around, and had to be on guard against the strange things that were thrown in from outside. The vice president rushed into the president's office anxiously. He looked at Robert, who was sipping his tea leisurely, and said, "President, this is already the 10th rotten egg that has been thrown into the building after the rankings were released. Now, people are saying that we took Mamie's money to create the rankings for money. There's no credibility at all. What should we do?" "Don't worry. Isn't this situation within our expectations?" Robert said with a smile. He picked up the teapot, poured a cup of tea, and handed it to the vice president. The vice president took the teacup and downed it in one gulp. He sighed heavily and said, "I didn't expect to cause such a huge uproar. Almost the entire Chaos City is saying that we took the money, but when have we ever seen money? We don't even have a copper coin. If this spreads further, I reckon the city lord will punish our food association again. Don't worry. The people who created the rankings are all famous masters. We're just collating the rankings. If even a ranking like this can't be trusted, then there's no need for our food association to exist. We might as well disband." Robert also put down the teacup in his hand. He stood up and walked to the window. He looked at the restaurant owners who were stirring up trouble outside, and sneered. These fellows are used to using money to buy the rankings. They always think that others will do the same thing as them. They just don't know how to spend more effort on their own restaurants, researching new dishes, and improving their recipes. If they want to create a ruckus, let them. The public's eyes are sharp. They will verify the authenticity of this ranking sooner or later. What we have to do is to hold our bottom line and never back down. All right. I'll go and tell them to be careful. The vice president looked at Robert with a determined expression. He put down the cup, turned, and walked out quickly. So many customers. Are they all lining up to beat up the boss? At the entrance of Mamie's, Eugene was shocked to see the long line at the entrance of the restaurant. Chapter 1035. The two brothers, Fabian and Eugene, had yet to recover from the shock of Mamie's dominating the 6 rankings. They were even more shocked when they saw the dazzling signboard and the 2 long lines at the door. "Maybe," Fabian said uncertainly, as it was his first time seeing such a scene. "Big brother, do you think that ranking is real? Is this restaurant really that impressive? Is it the best in everything?" Eugene asked softly. "I don't know about that either. But, if they didn't have the ability, they wouldn't dare to do that." Fabian shook his head with a grave expression. They had come to challenge Meg this time because they were betting on their ancestors' method of roasting chicken and their dignity as chefs. If they lost, they wouldn't know what to do, as they had just gained a foothold in Chaos City. "Don't worry. If it's other dishes, we might not be as good as him, but when it comes to roasting chicken, we definitely won't be afraid of him. We have only focused on one thing for so many years, and no one can do it better than us." Fabian patted Eugene's shoulder with a smile. Eugene's face was also filled with confidence as he nodded and said, "Yes. We definitely won't lose to him. Let's go challenge him now." Fabian stopped Eugene, who was about to walk towards Mamie's, with a smile, and said, "Let's look for him after he's closed. There are so many customers lining up, and he definitely won't be free now. We still have to show basic courtesy." "All right." Eugene nodded. The number of customers lining up outside Mamie's had more than doubled, and most of them were there because of the delicious cuisine rankings. Among them, there were those who trusted the delicious cuisine rankings, foodies who came because of its reputation, and villains who had bad intentions and wanted to ruin Mamie's reputation. This made the entrance of Mamie's very lively all of a sudden. Mamie's dominating the rankings naturally made the regulars at Mamie's feel proud, and they were all discussing this matter excitedly. As for those who had ulterior motives and wanted to stir up trouble, they didn't let go of this opportunity. They started to make sarcastic remarks about Amy spending money on the rankings in an attempt to stir up the crowd's anger. At this time, the sweet and savory parties, who usually fought fiercely against each other, showed a rare unity. They used their well-trained tongues to scold those who came to their door and ran away resentfully, showing a terrifying cohesion. After that, Meg placed the enlarged version of the menu at the entrance of the restaurant. A snack easily cost 200 to 300 copper coins, while a grilled fish cost 200 to 500 copper coins. All of a sudden, the customers who came to watch the show were scared away. This boss is so black-hearted. This snack alone is enough to buy 5 or 6 of our roast chickens. Isn't this obviously a scam? Eugene looked at the menu and was a little speechless. You can't say that. Look, after those customers saw the menu, they still didn't leave, and didn't show any signs of surprise. Most of them are regulars of the restaurant. To be able to attract so many regulars, this boss must be quite something. Fabian shook his head as he looked at the long line that had suddenly reduced by 1/3 of the customers. In the restaurant, Meg, who had just finished his lunch, looked at everyone and said with a smile, there may be some picky customers and people with ulterior motives today. Let's just carry on as usual. There's no need to deliberately cater to them. If anything unpleasant happens, settle it neatly. Don't let people talk about you, and don't damage the reputation of Mamie's. Father, it's okay. If anyone dares to not pay, I'll beat them all to death. Amy said with her little fists clenched. Little girl, you should speak more elegantly. Meg smiled as he patted Amy's head. Then what should I say? Amy was a little puzzled. Send them all to heaven, Meg said with a smile. Okay. Amy nodded. Although she didn't quite understand what sending them to heaven had to do with being beaten to death, since her father had said so, she would change it to this way. What I hate the most is falsification. I didn't expect that even the gourmet cuisine rankings would do this now. Even my favorite roast pig has been ranked 4th on the meat rankings. This Mamie's is simply a cancer. What red braised pork? How can it be ranked first? What a joke. Dunn, who was in the line, looked at Mamie's signboard angrily. He didn't argue with others and just kept quiet. When he entered the restaurant later, he would order a portion of red braised pork. After eating it himself, he would be able to justify himself. He had to fight for the roast pig that he had believed in for 10 years. No matter what others said, he didn't believe that there was any meat in this world that was more delicious than roast pig. There were quite a few customers with similar thoughts. It was rare for normal people to fight with others for a ranking. However, there were quite a few people who were unhappy and wanted to verify it in person. Welcome. At that moment, the door of the restaurant was open from the inside. The restaurant had officially opened for business. I'd like a portion of red braised pork, Dunn said directly to Yabamiya without flipping through the menu on the table. Okay, please wait a moment. Yabamiya nodded. He couldn't help but take another look at this customer who had a faint hint of anger in his tone. He didn't know that there were so many resentful customers in the restaurant today. I'd like a portion of yellow braised chicken soup, Bolton said as he sat down. When he saw that the freshwater seafood soup from the Sith restaurant was ranked below the braised chicken soup, he felt a little indignant. Hence, he specially came to taste the chicken soup to see how it tasted. It was actually ranked first on the soup leaderboard. I'm sorry, sir. We only have yellow braised chicken and rice here. We don't have yellow braised chicken soup, Gina said as she shook her head. No chicken soup. Then why is your restaurant's yellow braised chicken soup first on the soup rankings? Isn't this a scam? Bolton said with a frown. He was even more certain that there was something wrong with the rankings. Brother, the chicken soup in this yellow braised chicken is the best. It's only right that it's first on the soup rankings. It's just that Mr. Mack didn't sell it separately, Harrison said with a smile as he sat opposite him. Bolton flipped open the menu in front of him. There was indeed only yellow braised chicken and rice on it. There was no yellow braised chicken soup. He also realized that he had indeed lost his composure earlier. He closed the menu and said to Yabamiya, "Then I'd like a portion of yellow braised chicken and rice." "Okay, please wait a moment." Mia nodded and turned to leave. "Your red braised pork." Mia quickly placed a portion of red braised pork in front of Dunn. Chapter 1036. Is this red braised pork? Dunn scrutinized the bowl of meat in front of him. The pork, which was fat and lean, was cut into long cubes. It was dyed a bright red by the thick broth, and there was no trace of grease in it. The edges of the pig's skin were slightly curled, glowing with oil and giving off a sparkling and translucent feeling. As soon as the bowl was put down, a strong meaty aroma hit his face. This aroma! How can it be so tempting? Dunn's eyes lit up almost immediately. His throat moved, and he could not help but swallow his saliva. 10 years ago, when Dukas Restaurant first launched the roast pig, he was lucky enough to be in the first batch of people to taste it. The delicious roast pig seemed to have opened the door to a new world for him. That amazing feeling made him want to look back often in the past 10 years. Although he could no longer find the amazing feeling from back then, and it had become more of a habit, in his heart, the roast pig still ranked first among all the delicacies. But now, the impactful aroma of this red braised pork was shaking his heart. The aroma of the meat was stimulated to the extreme by the spices, and it made him a little amazed. It was the same feeling he had when he first saw the roast pig. No. The roast pig is the most delicious. Dunn shook his head and drove the thought out of his mind. But when he looked at the red braised pork in the black pottery bowl, he could not help but gulp. Let me have a taste and see if this red braised pork, which is ranked first on the meat list, really deserves the title, or is it just a ranking bought with money? Dunn thought to himself as he picked up a piece of red braised pork with his chopsticks and put it into his mouth. With a light chew, the red braised pork melted in his mouth. The fatty meat almost melted in his mouth. The soft pig skin did not have the toughness of ordinary pig skin at all. It added a little chewiness and brought an even stronger sense of pleasure. The sweet and soft, fatty but not greasy red braised pork was so delicious that Dunn had completely forgotten the purpose of his visit. The tip of his tongue was trembling, and that was the cheering of his taste buds. It was just a small piece of pork. She didn't know what kind of magic the chef had cast on it, but it actually made it so delicious. Just one bite was enough to make people fall in love with it, unable to extricate themselves. An image of a roast suckling pig running towards him with its short legs appeared in Dunn's mind. Then, it was sent flying by a flaming fiery pig. All that was left in his mind was the fiery pig that was running wildly. Delicious. It was extremely delicious. What an incredible smell. Dunn was not stingy with his compliments. What was a roast suckling pig? He didn't even recognize his own family anymore. There was only the bowl of red braised pork in front of him. Compared to the roasted suckling pig whose taste, heat, and ingredients had all reached the pinnacle, the roasted suckling pig that was originally perfect in his mind seemed a little rough. The flavor of the pork couldn't be completely covered. The inner layer of fat didn't give off a greasy feeling, and the dry lean meat tasted even worse. If there was no comparison, these were small flaws that could be ignored by Dunn. However, after tasting this delicious red braised meat, these shortcomings were infinitely magnified, to the extent that even a true fan like him could not ignore them. They were both pork, so the difference between the two was even more obvious. The difference between the two chefs' culinary skills was especially obvious in the red braised meat and the roasted suckling pig. Dunn's feelings were a little complicated. The thing that he loved for 10 years had been shattered by a piece of red braised meat. He could not say the words that he had previously vowed to say. If such an extremely delicious red braised meat could not occupy the top spot on the meat rankings, then the delicious cuisine rankings would indeed be unfair. Although his feelings were complicated, Dunn's mouth was very simple. He ate a mouthful of rice and a mouthful of red braised meat happily. As a carnivore, he had not found a taste that amazed him for a long time. However, he found that feeling again today. Red braised meat, the top spot on the meat rankings. It deserves it. Dunn put down his chopsticks after finishing a portion of red braised meat and could not help but exclaim. Can this even be called soup? This is simply blasphemy to soup. Bolton looked at the braised chicken in front of him with a ridiculous expression. Although he had to admit that the aroma was indeed very tempting, the soup that did not even have any meat in it actually beat the freshwater seafood soup to the top spot on the soup rankings. Wasn't this too much? Don't jump to conclusions so quickly. Try the soup first. Be careful with your tongue. Don't bite yourself, Harrison said with a chuckle as he took a bite of the Ruggiamo in his hand. He could already tell that this big brother opposite him was here to cause trouble, but he appeared to be more restrained and calm. Hence, it made him want to watch a good show. If this can be considered soup, then it's simply rubbing the customer's IQ on the ground. Bolton pursed his lips and scooped up a spoonful of golden red chicken soup. Before the spoon even got close, the rich aroma of the chicken soup mixed with a mysterious aroma had already spread to his face. Although he did not want to admit it, this aroma was indeed very special and tempting. Gulp. Bolton's throat moved uncontrollably, and the sound of him swallowing his saliva could be heard clearly. How can the aroma of this chicken soup be so rich, and there's even a unique aroma mixed in it? It makes the aroma of the chicken soup even more delicious. Bolton blushed, but he was even more in disbelief. The freshwater seafood soup at Sith restaurant was most praised for its freshness. This freshwater seafood soup only used the wild freshwater seafood caught from the river that day, and added in the chef's secret concoction to bring out the freshness of the freshwater seafood to the maximum. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the best in Chaos City. However, the aroma of this chicken soup gave Bolton a feeling that it had already surpassed the freshwater seafood soup. It was even higher by more than one level. Maybe it's just the aroma. The taste of the soup is the most important. It's just ordinary chicken, and it's not even a specially made soup. How can it be mentioned in the same breath as the freshwater seafood soup? Bolton tried his best to convince himself, and then put the chicken soup into his mouth. Silence, silence, smells so good. Bolton exclaimed in admiration. The freshness of the chicken soup was enhanced to the maximum by that mysterious aroma. Once it entered his mouth, the taste buds on the tip of his tongue went crazy, and he was instantly enveloped by the chicken soup, unable to extricate himself. After swallowing it, he felt all the pores on his body open up, and the warmth nourished his whole body. He felt comfortable all over. If the freshwater seafood soup's freshness came from freshly caught freshwater seafood, then the freshness of this chicken soup was the crystallization of the collision of fresh chicken and some mysterious ingredient. The freshness that blossomed from the combination of the two took his breath away. Although the freshwater seafood soup was good, it was much worse than this chicken soup. Braised chicken soup, the number one on the soup rankings, was equally deserving of the title. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1037. Arriving in a rage and leaving with a smile on their faces became the true portrayal of many customers who came because of the delicious cuisine rankings. After tasting that incredible delicacy, the anger in their hearts instantly dissipated into nothingness. Delicacy was redefined. If such delicacies couldn't be ranked first, then wouldn't the delicious cuisine rankings be really terrible? Why isn't anyone causing trouble? Weren't they arguing quite fiercely just now? Why did they all change their expressions when they went in and came out? Could it be that the boss threatened them? Eugene muttered, his face full of confusion. Fabian shook his head and sighed. Looking at their expressions, it doesn't seem like they were threatened. They are really satisfied. This boss is a powerful person. I'm sorry, the restaurant's business hours are over. Customers, please come earlier next time. Meg flipped the wooden sign on the door and said with a smile as he looked at the 20-odd customers who were still lining up at the door. Boss, we came after watching the delicious cuisine rankings. It wasn't easy for you to get our turn. You're sending us away just like that. It doesn't fit your reputation as number one on the rankings, does it? A werewolf said with some displeasure. Yeah, it's still early now. There are more than 20 of us here. We came because we wanted to give you face. How can there be a boss who chases customers out? Your restaurant has taken the number one spot on the rankings. We must come today to try it. If we don't get to eat it, we won't leave. The other customers also echoed. They were quite agitated and even had a hint of sarcasm. The restaurant's business hours are fixed. I've always been punctual. This is the voice of Mamis. It's my principle not to work overtime. As for the delicious cuisine rankings, that's based on one's ability. Your face is too big. I'm afraid we can't handle it. Don't reward us. Keep it for yourself. Customers who really want to try Mamis, please come earlier next time to line up. Of course, if there are customers who don't want to leave because they think the scenery here is good, then please feel free to do so. Meg wasn't a pushover. He calmly replied. He recognized a few restaurant owners in the crowd. His rivals in the same industry loved this kind of excitement. Everyone choked on Meg's words and didn't know how to respond. Usually, when they went to eat, the waiters and bosses would greet them with smiles on their faces. They were used to being arrogant and bossy, so when they suddenly met such a stubborn guy, they naturally felt unhappy. Although Meg's words were irritating, they were also watertight. She couldn't find anything to refute. She held her anger in her heart, but she couldn't spit it out. This boss is really straightforward. Even I feel happy after hearing what he said. Eugene chuckled. What he couldn't stand the most were customers who thought that they could go to heaven just because they took the money. However, he was usually stopped by his brother. Meg's words touched his heart, and the way he looked at Meg became much more pleasing to the eye. Seeing the embarrassed expressions of the crowd, Meg's mood immediately brightened. He had tried his best to restrain his poisonous tongue, but these guys' fighting strength was too weak, so he lost interest. He turned to look at the orc brothers standing at the side and said with a smile, I've made the two of you wait. The duel will be held at the entrance of the restaurant. You guys get ready. I'll go get ready too. Okay. Fabian nodded and walked forward with Eugene. He put down two big bags and began to take out all kinds of things. Duel. The customers who were about to leave couldn't help but stop when they saw this scene. It seemed that the boss and the orc brothers were going to have a gourmet duel. It was a pity that they couldn't taste the food in the restaurant, but it would be very interesting to see the boss being defeated. Amy's had suppressed all the restaurants in Chaos City today, and topped all the rankings. Some of the rankings were even in the top few places, which had already incurred the wrath of the chefs. This was equivalent to announcing that Meg alone had beaten all the chefs in Chaos City in all the cuisines. It could be expected that there would be more chefs coming to challenge Meg to clear the rankings. However, he didn't expect the challenge to come so soon. Meg, who was about to enter the restaurant, stopped again, and asked Fabian, since it's a duel, I wonder how you're going to determine the winner. This pair of orc brothers had been here for a long time, but they didn't choose to enter the restaurant when there were the most customers. Instead, they chose to wait outside quietly. This made Meg have a good impression of them. This challenge was forced by the system. On the Norland continent, where the culinary standards were generally low, it was already quite impressive to be able to use such a creative way to roast chicken. Meg didn't have much animosity towards them. Fabian scratched his head with an honest smile, and said, I haven't had a duel with anyone before. You decide. Meg raised his eyebrows. He was really honest. He even gave him such an advantage. After thinking for a while, he looked at the customers who were still watching the show, and smilingly said, since it's a gourmet duel, the most important thing is whether the customers think it's good or not. We're going to have a roast chicken duel. I wonder if any of you are willing to be the judge for this duel. Fabian, Eugene, and the other customers were all stunned. They looked at Meg strangely. This fellow had just dissed them mercilessly, and now he was giving them the right to decide the winner. Was he dumb? Or dumb? Big brother, is there something wrong with his brain? Eugene whispered. Fabian shook his head. He also couldn't figure out what Meg was thinking. The werewolf who spoke earlier walked out, and said, I have all the time in the world. Let me see if the roast chicken made by the owner of the restaurant ranked number 1 on the delicious cuisine rankings is really worthy of its reputation. Me. Then, 2 more customers walked out. Mr. Mac, did we miss lunch? Just then, a deep voice sounded from behind the crowd. 2 tall orcs walked over with big clubs in their hands. They were the brothers Hege and Hebeng, whom Mac hadn't seen for a long time. Yes. The lunch hours are already over. Meg nodded with a smile. This pair of orc brothers were regular customers when the restaurant first opened. They had gone back for 2 months because of the tribe's matters. Judging from the bags they were carrying, they must have rushed over to eat as soon as they arrived in Chaos City. Sigh, what a pity. If I had known, I would have run faster. Hebeng rubbed his bald head in frustration. Amy. Hege still had an honest smile on his face as he looked into the restaurant. Amy has gone to class, Max said with a smile. He knew that Hege doted on Amy, and would always bring her some small gifts every time he came from the tribe. Hege scratched his head with a smile, and said, then we'll come back tonight. Hege, Lord Hebeng. Just then, Fabian and Eugene, who were at the side, called out softly. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1038. The Fabian brothers from the roast chicken? Why are you here? Hebeng and Hege were surprised to see Fabian and Yuri. They were surprised to see Fabian and Yuri. After some chatter in the orc language, both sides figured out the situation. Fabian and Yuri were from Hege's tribe. They were familiar with Hebeng and didn't expect to meet them here. You want to challenge Mr. Mac? Your courage is commendable. Hebeng opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to praise these 2 brothers. Although their roast chicken was indeed the best in the tribe, competing with Mr. Mac in cooking was just asking for trouble. Meg was also surprised by this situation. Lord Hebeng, he said our roast chicken is not as good as his. We brothers are not convinced, so we want to have a roast chicken duel with him. Yuri nodded, his eyes full of the desire to win. Mr. Mac, this is a little brother from our tribe. He hasn't seen much of the world. But since he wants to compete with you, you don't have to be polite. Aren't you 2 short of judges? We brothers haven't had lunch yet. Why don't you let us be the judges? I can't say anything nice, but you'll know if it's delicious after tasting it, Hebeng said, looking at Meg. Okay, then it's settled. Meg nodded. Although the relationship was a little complicated, Hebeng's words weren't wrong. The arena had been set up, so it was obvious that they had to fight. Meg turned and went in. Soon, Mia and the others helped carry a small oven and kitchen utensils out. They also set up at the entrance of the restaurant. Everything was ready. Meg looked at Fabian and Eugene, who had also set up, and said, let's start. Eugene nodded and took out a live chicken from the cloth bag. He twisted its neck, and the chicken immediately stopped moving. Then he began to bleed and cut open its stomach. After a simple treatment, he stuffed a bag of spices into the chicken's stomach. He didn't remove the feathers, but directly covered it with a layer of mud and a thick layer of clay. He put it in a simple oven and began to roast it. The whole process revealed a simple and crude taste. Because the movements were skillful, it made the onlookers look at him in a new light. On the other hand, Meg was taking his time. The 3 yellow chicken had just been cleaned, and a layer of spices and condiments had been carefully smeared on it. After stuffing a lot of spices into its stomach, it was finally wrapped in a tender green lotus leaf. After tying it tightly with cotton thread, it was wrapped in a layer of yellow mud outside of the lotus leaf. This yellow mud was much cleaner and finer than the yellowish-brown mud of the Orc brothers. It was spread evenly on the outside of the lotus leaves, and it looked like a big oval-shaped egg with a smooth surface. The cooking method looks very similar, but the one made by the owner of Mamie's looks much more comfortable. I wouldn't dare to eat a chicken that hasn't been plucked. Yeah, it's covered in mud. It looks a little scary. Is the mud really clean? The restaurant owner's yellow mud looks very high-end. My dad makes pottery bowls, but the mud he uses is not as good as this. The onlookers discussed in low voices. Although the methods were similar, looking at the production process of the 2 sides, they gradually had expectations in their hearts. Brother, why did he pluck the chicken's feathers? He even used leaves to wrap the chicken? A roast chicken made this way would have no soul, Eugene whispered to Fabian. But listen to what the customers are saying. They seem to like this roast chicken more. Fabian shook his head with a thoughtful look in his eyes. It shouldn't be. Eugene also heard the whispers of the customers, and felt that it was a little unbelievable. The people from Mamie's watched at the side, and cheered Meg on softly. Chicken. Egg. Gino looked at the chicken that Meg put into the roasting oven with sparkling eyes. This was the hope of Lantist. It turned out that this was not a natural egg, but made by Mr. Meg. A roast chicken wrapped in yellow mud is completely different from a roast duck. Boss is really breaking through himself every time. He's really amazing. Mia looked at Meg with admiration. "Es delicious." Gina gave a thumbs up as she verified as the only person present who had tasted the beggar's chicken. Meg put the roast chicken into the oven, and both parties waited quietly like that, waiting for the roast chicken to come out of the oven. The commotion here also attracted a lot of onlookers. Mamie's had just been in the limelight on the delicious cuisine rankings. Once the news of the restaurant owner's duel with someone spread, many restaurant owners rushed over to see if the owner of Mamie's really had the ability to dominate the rankings. The beggar's chicken was still being roasted in the oven, and the onlookers had already surrounded it. In order to increase the efficiency of the roast chicken, Fabian and the rest had just changed to a magic oven. Although it was harder to control the heat, the roasting efficiency was indeed much higher. When the heat was turned up to the maximum, a roast chicken could be roasted in 20 minutes. Alright, let's come out of the oven. Fabian controlled the time, and turned off the heating of the oven. He twisted the lid, and a gust of hot air rushed out. Eugene took an iron skewer and poked it into the oven. A roast chicken was poked out of the oven just like that. The aroma of the roast chicken wafted out of the opening, causing the eyes of the surrounding people to brighten. The people at the front of the crowd were all customers who hadn't eaten at noon. Once they were hit by the aroma, their stomachs began to rumble. They were actually a little hungry as they stared at the lump of roasted brown soil. This method of roasting chicken is really unique. I wonder which restaurant these 2 chefs are from. I can go and try it when I have time. Many customers' eyes also brightened. They were already discussing how to try it when they had time. Do I have to wait for you to come along? Fabian asked Meg as he looked at him. No need. Freshly roasted chicken is the most delicious. I still have to wait a little longer. Meg shook his head. He didn't want to take advantage of such an opportunity. Freshly roasted chicken and cold roasted chicken were two completely different types of food. All right. Fabian nodded. He took a sharp piece of wood from the side and poked it into the area where Eugene had poked the skewer. He then flicked it outwards, and a layer of mud shell and chicken feathers peeled off. The aroma of roasted chicken immediately filled the air. Eugene passed over a plate, and Fabian placed the roast chicken, whose mud shell had been perfectly removed, on the plate. The crimson roast chicken was a little shriveled, and not a single chicken feather was left. The unique aroma of roasted chicken was quite rich, causing many people to stand on their tiptoes to take a look. It smells so good. I didn't think that roasted chicken could be so fragrant. I'm a little regretful that I didn't step forward to be a judge just now. Mamie's roast chicken doesn't seem to be on the list today, right? Does this boss know how to make roast chicken? The customers discussed in low voices as they looked at the roast chicken in front of Fabian and swallowed their saliva. Fabian took out a knife and made a few cuts on the roast chicken. He placed the chicken on different plates, and then brought them to the 5 judges who were already seated. Please have a taste. A confident smile appeared on Fabian's face. He had roasted chicken since he was a child. Chapter 1039. The roast chicken made by the Orc brothers was a little red in color, and the skin was dry and greasy. The aroma of the roast chicken was mixed with a special spicy aroma. It was a little pungent at first, but it wasn't unacceptable. Instead, it added a special aroma to the roast chicken, making it different from ordinary roast chicken. It was different from the roast chicken that they usually saw on the grill. It was the first time that they had seen a roast chicken wrapped in yellow soil, and the aroma was surprisingly alluring. The judges hadn't had lunch yet, so they were naturally a little overwhelmed by the aroma of the roast chicken. Haebang took a big bite of the drumstick on his plate, and nodded as he chewed. The roast chicken of those 2 brothers seems to have improved again. After you came to Chaos City, the people in the tribe often talked about you too. They all said that the roast chicken made by you two is the best in the entire tribe. It's just that we can't eat it orally now. Hege took a bite of the chicken, and also gave them a thumbs up. He praised them in the Orc language. The werewolf at the side also grabbed a piece of chicken, put it into his mouth, and chewed loudly. He swallowed the meat and the bones, and nodded as he praised, delicious. A male elf and a female human were also chosen. They looked at the roast chicken in front of them with a hint of hesitation in their eyes. As elves, they were much more obsessed with food than other races. The way the Orc brothers cooked had frightened them. After the roast chicken was killed, they didn't even do a simple cleaning. Instead, they wrapped the chicken in some muddy water and yellow soil, and put it directly into the oven for roasting. After the roast was completed, the feathers were all taken away by the yellow soil, but they still couldn't bring themselves to eat the roast chicken in front of them. The elf hesitated for a long while before picking up a piece of skinless chicken with his chopsticks and putting it into his mouth. The spicy flavor of the spices rushed into his mouth, and made him feel a little uncomfortable. Although it was diluted by the flavor of the chicken, he still didn't like the spicy texture. Furthermore, the texture of the chicken was a little dry for him. He chewed for a long while before he could swallow it. He put down his chopsticks after just one bite. Regardless of whether it was the texture or the taste, he didn't want to try a second bite. The other woman also picked up a piece of chicken and placed it in her mouth. After chewing carefully, her brows furrowed slightly. Then, she quickly relaxed and revealed a smile on her face. She then continued to eat happily. Although she was a little surprised by the way the Orc brothers handled the ingredients, the roast chicken was surprisingly good. She liked chewy food, and the more she chewed, the more fragrant the chicken became. Apart from the male elf, the other 4 judges all looked satisfied. On the other hand, Meg's roast chicken was still not ready. Is there something wrong with this boss's brain? Out of the 5 judges, 3 of them were guests that he had insulted before, and the other 2 were from the same tribe as the 2 orcs. If he can win against such judges, I'm going to stream myself shrieking. Now, there are 4 judges who are satisfied with the orc brother's roast chicken, and his roast chicken is not done yet. There seems to be no suspense about the outcome. Tisk tsk, this is Mamie's who dominates all 6 of the gourmet cuisine rankings. It would be interesting if she lost to a roadside stall owner. The onlookers discussed among themselves. It was supposed to be an ordinary cooking duel, but because Mamie's was in the limelight today, there were many passers-by who wanted to watch a good show. Boss should be able to win, right? Yabamiya clenched her fists in worry. If he can be defeated like this, then he's not him. Elizabeth looked at Meg's back. She was relaxed and was not affected by the passers-by at all. Yes, Uncle Meg has been cooking this roast chicken for the past few days. Although I haven't tried it yet, it must be super delicious, Anna said with a nod of her little head. The orc brothers shared the remaining roast chicken with the onlookers to taste, and it attracted another round of praise. Some people even asked where the orc brothers had set up their stall and expressed their interest in visiting. Ding! At that moment, a crisp sound came from Meg's oven. Meg extinguished the fire in the oven, opened the lid, and took the beggar's chicken out of the oven with a shovel. It's out of the oven. Everyone looked at Meg. The mud casing that covered the beggar's chicken had turned golden after being roasted by the fire. It looked like a big golden egg, and its surface was even smoother than an egg. It was glazed like porcelain, and it made people's eyes light up. Compared to the orc brothers' roast chicken that looked like a big mound, the mud casing in front of Meg was like an exquisite piece of art. Even if it was said to be an egg, not many people would doubt it. How did he roast the mud to look so good? Just based on its appearance alone, it's already much better than our bumpkin chicken, Fabian thought with a frown. What's the use of looking good in the mud casing? It's not like you're eating a roast chicken. If you ask me, the mud casing has already been roasted into a brick, and the roast chicken inside will most likely be charred. The fat demon who had previously said that he wanted to run around naked spoke again, but this time, he seemed to lack confidence. This is a beggar's chicken, Meg said loudly. Then, he picked up the small wooden hammer and gently tapped it in the center of the mud casing. Crack! A crisp cracking sound rang out, and cracks spread out from the point of the tap. Then, the eggshell spread out like a flower, revealing the roasted golden beggar's chicken inside. A rich aroma, along with the opening of the eggshell, was instantly released like a bomb. Wow! The onlookers were suddenly in an uproar. The rich aroma of the roast chicken hit them, catching them off guard. No one had expected the aroma to be so impactful and alluring. The golden roast chicken in the yellow mud casing seemed to be glowing at that moment. It was eye-catching. Is this really the aroma of roast chicken? Why do I feel the breath of summer? It's as if I'm looking at a lotus swaying in a lotus pond in midsummer. This is too fragrant. My God, did the boss drug the roast chicken? Gulp! Everyone's exclamations were accompanied by the sound of saliva swallowing. Everyone looked at the roast chicken in front of Meg and tried hard to suppress their urge to rush forward and take a bite. Eugene's eyes widened, and he swallowed his saliva. This is too fragrant, isn't it? Brother, he's breaking the rules. The spices he used are more suitable than ours. They were perfectly hidden behind the chicken, but they also enhanced the aroma of the chicken to the extreme. Fabian looked at the beggar's chicken, and his gaze slowly moved up to Meg. With a serious expression, he said, "This is an expert. No pop-up window." Chapter 1040. The thin mud shell shattered cleanly and did not leave any crumbs on the chicken. The lotus leaves lining the chicken were still green like green leaves, setting off the golden beggar's chicken in the middle. The beggar's chicken was plump, and its golden skin glowed with oil. It looked very tempting. The instant the mud shell cracked open, the aroma that was released stunned all the onlookers. If the Orc brothers' roast chicken had made everyone's eyes light up, then this amazing roast chicken had completely subverted the aroma that roast chicken should have in everyone's hearts. It smells so good. It's completely different from the roast duck, but it's equally amazing, Mia said as she swallowed her saliva. Chicken, chicken. Gina licked her lips. She still couldn't forget the delicious roast chicken after tasting it last night. Furthermore, in her heart, this was no longer just a roast chicken, but a sacred object that could save Lantist from the curse. The people at Mamie's were relieved when they smelled the aroma. They really didn't have to worry about the boss's product. I knew Fabian and the rest were going to lose when I smelled this aroma. However, losing to Mr. Mac isn't something shameful. After all, who can beat him? Haybang finished the drumstick in his hand in 2 mouthfuls, and then looked at the beggar's chicken in front of Meg with anticipation. Haga smiled to show his approval, but didn't say anything. Meg took out his Chinese cleaver, and sliced half of the roast chicken into 5 plates with a few slashes. Then, he placed them in front of the 5 judges. Let me try it first. That werewolf grabbed a piece of chicken and put it into his mouth. His face that looked a little ruthless actually revealed a blissful expression instantly. He seemed to have seen a fat little chick jumping into his mouth and being chewed up in one bite. Oh! That fresh and tender texture was simply too wonderful. However, this bite was really too little. After chewing a few times, it slid down his throat mischievously and turned into a warm current that made his whole body feel comfortable. He quickly threw the remaining piece of chicken into his mouth and chewed it carefully. The tender chicken, crispy skin, and even the bones were very crispy. He chewed it lightly, and it crumbled. The more he chewed, the more fragrant it became. He didn't even spit out any crumbs. Let me try it too. Haybang picked up a drumstick and put it in his mouth. With a slurp, the chicken slid into his mouth from the bone. It was so tender and delicious that he didn't even want to bite it too hard. He chewed it carefully, feeling the delicious chicken jumping between the tip of his tongue and teeth, and then swallowed it. In comparison, the roast chicken made by the Fabian brothers could only be considered a crude version. Only the roast chicken made by Mr. Mac could be considered a delicacy. Mr. Mac, if you do this, I won't want to go back to the tribe. Haybang looked at Meg with some resentment. Mr. Mac, it's delicious. Haga took a bite of the chicken, and his face lit up. He gave Meg a thumbs up. Is it really that delicious? The elf who had been itching for a long time couldn't help but pick up her chopsticks and pick up a piece of chicken. Unlike the rough way that the Orc brothers handled the chicken, Meg's meticulous handling of the chicken was something that even a clean freak like her couldn't find any fault with. Even the servants at home might not be able to do it to such an extent. Other than the rich aroma of the roast chicken, what surprised him was the hint of lotus leaf fragrance mixed in with the aroma. After smelling the rich aroma of meat for a long time, one would more or less get a little tired of it. However, the hint of lotus leaf fragrance mixed in with the aroma eliminated this feeling of tiredness, and made the aroma more refreshing. He opened his mouth and took a bite. The crispy chicken skin was gently bitten open, and the tender meat instantly melted in his mouth. The delicious taste bloomed on the tip of his tongue, and his taste buds fell into a frenzy. The freshly slaughtered chicken had a unique fresh taste. The plump chicken was full of elasticity, and when he bit into it, it was smooth and chewy. There was no dry taste at all. The chicken didn't seem to have time to stand still on the tip of his tongue before it slid down his throat and turned into a warm current that seeped into his heart and spleen, making his whole body relax. Tender without any residue, fresh without being greasy. The wonderful taste made him fall into a vortex of deliciousness, unable to extricate himself. He saw a pond of lotus leaves, and a chicken jumping on the lotus leaves. What a leisurely and interesting scene. A smile appeared on the elf's face. It was a smile of happiness. He hadn't tasted a delicacy that could make people happy for a long time. The last time should be more than 100 years ago. In the Wind Forest, their small guard team repelled the orcs' attack, and the captain led them to roast and share a wild chicken. The roasted wild chicken was shared with his comrades, but he felt that he was eating a delicious meal. When he opened his eyes again, there was a glimmer of tears in his eyes. The woman beside him was also eating the roast chicken happily. At this moment, she finally understood that it wasn't that she didn't like to eat soft things, but that she didn't like to eat soft things that tasted bad. Even if the roast chicken was as delicious as this, she would still enjoy it no matter how soft it was. Gulp. The onlookers looked at the way the judges ate and swallowed their saliva countless times. They couldn't wait to rush forward and replace them. Those who had the opportunity to become judges but missed it were even more regretful now. As for the fat orc who had boasted about running naked, he was nowhere to be found. There was no need for the judges to say anything. There was no suspense about the outcome of this duel. And those who originally wanted to see Mamie make a fool of herself had their impression of Mamie completely changed after seeing this exciting duel. To be able to make such a delicious roast chicken, Mamie's first place on the gourmet cuisine rankings might really be well deserved. Did we lose? Eugene was a little disappointed. We do have many areas that we can improve on. Fabian patted Eugene's shoulder, but didn't show too much disappointment. Instead, his eyes seemed to be shining. It's too delicious. I'm so moved that I'm about to cry. How can there be such delicious chicken in this world? The werewolf closed his eyes and savored the taste for a while. He opened his eyes with hot tears and looked at Meg. Boss, can you give me another one? Sorry, beggar's chicken will only be officially sold at night. Meg shook his head. Then, half will do. The werewolf was unwilling to give up. He stared at the remaining half of the beggar's chicken in front of Meg. With the werewolf's howl, everyone's gaze fell on the half of the beggar's chicken in front of Meg. They didn't know if Meg would sell this half of the beggar's chicken. Some people were already prepared to make a bid. Sorry, this is an employee's afternoon tea. Meg still shook his head. He picked up the knife and cut up the remaining half of the beggar's chicken. Then, he placed it on a few plates and motioned for Mia and the others to come over and take away the afternoon tea. It's so lucky to be an employee in this restaurant. Everyone looked enviously at the girls who were happily taking away the beggar's chicken. The werewolf gritted his teeth and said, "Then, do you still accept employees?" Meg stared at the werewolf for a while and shook his head. "Uncle, you don't seem to match." Chapter 1041. The werewolf looked at the ladies and said shyly, "If only women can do it, please stop, stop." Meg quickly raised his hand to stop him. This was really a werewolf. Even if he really dared to cross-dress, he wouldn't dare to use it. Wouldn't that ruin his own reputation? It wasn't that he looked down on cross-dressers, but after all, not everyone could be as beautiful and natural as Shirley when cross-dressing. The conversation between the two of them also caused a burst of laughter from the surrounding crowd. Everyone looked at Meg with admiration. This boss was really interesting. Meg looked at the judges and said with a smile, "Everyone has already tasted both of our roast chickens. Please tell us which roast chicken you think is better." Everyone's gaze also fell on the judges. Although the outcome had already been decided, the final result still had to be announced by the judges who had personally tasted the roast chicken. The elf stood up and looked at Meg apologetically. Mr. Meg's roast chicken is the most delicious roast chicken I've ever eaten. I apologize for my previous rude remarks. With your exquisite culinary skills, you must have relied on your own ability to dominate the gourmet cuisine rankings. I'll come early to line up tonight. I must try this delicious beggar's chicken again. Welcome again. Meg smiled and nodded. Using delicacies to conquer customers was the most satisfying feeling. Fabian brothers, you guys did well too. But let's be honest. Mr. Mac's roast chicken is indeed more delicious. Hag raised his hand and pointed at Meg. Hag gave the Fabian brothers an encouraging look, then raised his hand and pointed at Meg. Although Mr. Mac isn't willing to take me in as an employee, the deliciousness of the roast chicken can't be hidden. You are my favorite. The werewolf looked at Meg affectionately. Meg felt a chill in his heart. He resisted the urge to kill the werewolf with one blow and looked at the last lady. Mr. Meg, I'm hardworking and capable. I learn everything quickly. Do you want to consider me? The lady had a professional fake smile on her face as she winked at Meg. I'm sorry, but the restaurant doesn't need to recruit at the moment. Meg smiled helplessly. Why did all these people want to be waiters? It was really puzzling. Although I'm very sad to be rejected, I can't make a choice that goes against my heart. So, I chose Mr. Meg. The lady covered her heart and said with a pained expression. Mr. Meg, you've won this duel. We've lost. Fabian took 2 steps forward, looking at Meg and cupping his hands. If you have any instructions, feel free to ask us brothers to do it. Consider this a punishment for our recklessness. We only said that we were going to have a roast chicken duel, but we didn't say there would be any punishment. Meg smiled and shook his head. Moreover, what I did that day was also wrong. If it were me, I definitely wouldn't be able to take it lying down. We were lucky to win today's duel. Let's end this matter here. Meg had a good impression of the Orc brothers and didn't intend to take anything from them. After all, this duel had been set up by the system. Both parties were innocent. After the duel ended, Amy's closed for the day. The crowd of onlookers also dispersed. However, the stunning beggar's chicken from before was deeply imprinted in everyone's minds. Many people had already made up their minds to line up earlier tonight to try out the taste of the beggar's chicken and see if it was really as amazing as they said it was. The ladies tasted the beggar's chicken at the side and were full of praise. It didn't need any dipping sauce or side dishes. The roast chicken itself was an unparalleled delicacy. You have a straightforward personality. I like it. Since that's the case, I, Eugene, will count you as a friend, Eugene said with a chuckle. Fabian saw Meg's sincere expression, so he didn't insist after some thought. After hesitating for a while, he mustered up his courage and asked, Mr. Meg, I wonder if you could give us some pointers on our roast chicken. Eugene also stopped smiling, and stood at the side to listen seriously with his hands by his side. They had lost today's duel wholeheartedly. They had originally thought that their roast chicken was the best in the world, but after seeing Meg's roast chicken, they realized that their roast chicken was still far from it. Compared to Meg, they were like children who had just started learning how to walk. I wouldn't dare to say pointers, but I've tasted your roast chicken. Perhaps you could listen to my suggestions. Meg saw that the two of them were asking sincerely, so he didn't hide anything. He thought for a while, and said, Firstly, since you want to do business in Chaos City, you can't keep the idea of making roast chicken in your tribe. If you want more customers to accept your roast chicken, it's very effective to make it clean and look good. Are you going to prepare the chicken in advance and then wrap it with leaves and yellow mud? Fabian was deep in thought. So this was the biggest reason why most of their customers were demons and orcs in the market. You can say that. Meg nodded and glanced at their yellowish-brown mud. If you use a purer and more viscous loss, the roast chicken might look better, and it will be heated more evenly in the oven. Fabian and Eugene nodded. Secondly, other than cleanliness, the texture of the roast chicken is also very important. Your bite force is stronger than that of humans and elves, so the texture of the roast chicken is more like cotton and firewood, and loses a lot of the original deliciousness of the chicken. This is very unfriendly to humans and elves. Reducing the roasting time appropriately to make the texture better can improve the quality of the roast chicken. Thirdly, the special spices can be retained, but the amount used can be reduced slightly so that the aroma of the chicken can reach a balance with the spices, and become delicious. The separation of the two will make the taste not easy to accept. Meg thought for a while, and nodded. Just these 3 points. They are my humble opinions. I'm enlightened. Fabian bowed deeply to Meg with gratitude in his eyes. Meg's words enlightened him. He discovered many of his shortcomings, and knew where to start. And these precious experiences were taught to him by Meg so selflessly, which made him very touched. Eugene's reaction was a beat slower, and he also bowed. He got up and scratched his head, and said, "You're indeed the best at making roast chicken. You flatter me, you flatter me." Meg was smiling, but he was cursing in his heart. He really didn't dare to accept such a compliment. Fabian and Eugene packed their things, and left. They had already decided to close the business for a few days to study how to make a more delicious roast chicken. No pop-up window. Chapter 1042. Boss, is it really okay for you to teach them how to make roast chicken? Will they steal our business? Yabamiya asked worriedly. It's okay. Isn't it interesting to let more people learn how to make delicious food? Meg shook his head with a smile. Business is endless. If the customers who can't afford to eat the beggar's chicken in our restaurant can eat the same delicious and cheap roast chicken that they make, that's pretty good too. Meg was very open-minded about this. Moreover, the positions of the two were completely different. Mamie's was a high-end restaurant, and it had already rejected many salaried customers. Meg wanted to make money, and he used the high-end ingredients provided by the system. He didn't feel guilty about setting the price of the dishes. Delicacies made with the best ingredients were indeed worth the price. However, he didn't mind letting more ordinary people taste different delicacies. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to give some advice to the Orc brothers. As for how much they could learn and what kind of roast chicken they could make, that would depend on their own abilities. It was impossible for Meg to teach them how to make beggar's chicken step by step since they were open for business. After the girls finished eating the beggar's chicken, they went forward to help clean up the kitchen utensils. Only Gina carefully gathered the broken eggshells together and held them in her arms. She looked at Meg with a pleading expression and said, I want, Gina, do you still want to eat this mud casing? Meg looked at Gina. Last night, she carried a mud casing upstairs as supper. Now, she was carrying another mud casing and refusing to put it down. Those who didn't know better would think that he was abusing his employees. Or did she have pica? Yes, yes. Gina nodded and then shook her head. She pointed to her mouth and waved her hand. Then, she pointed to the upper floor and made a gesture of keeping it. You want to keep it? Meg was even more confused. What kind of collecting hobby was this? Yes, yes. Gina nodded with a bright smile on her face. Looking at Gina's pure and bright smile, Meg couldn't bring himself to reject her. He could only nod helplessly and say, keep it then. The effect of dominating the gourmet cuisine rankings was even more exaggerated that night. Even before it was time to open for business, the long line at the entrance of Amy's had already doubled 3 times in the plaza. There were at least 700 to 800 people. Today's roast chicken duel at noon caused Mamie's reputation to undergo a reversal. Some passers-by also spontaneously started to speak up for Mamie. Excluding those who are here to watch the show, the maximum number of guests tonight can only be 400. Mia, tell the guests who are queuing after 400 to disperse. They won't be able to eat even if they continue queuing. Meg looked at the long line outside and frowned. He didn't like such a lively scene. Most of the customers who came today were here for something new, but the old regulars had lost their seats. However, he couldn't say anything. The restaurant didn't have a reservation system. First come, first served was the rule. No matter how familiar the customers were, they still had to line up. All right. Yabamiya went out with a sign and ordered 400 people. Then, she placed the sign next to the 400th customer and started to persuade the customers behind to give up. It's this restaurant, right? It's definitely right. Otherwise, why would there be so many fools queuing up? Our king said that this boss is good at cooking. We should capture him and bring him back to cook for us every day. Hey, King's idea is pretty good. In the corner, 2 Minotaur demons looked at Mamie's and muttered softly. Their eyes flashed with excitement. However, there are so many people. How are we going to make a move? King asked us to keep a low profile and not make a big deal out of it. Are you stupid? There are so many people, of course we can't make a move. Let's just take a nap here. When we wake up, there will definitely be no one here. We can make a move then. Yeah, silly. You're so smart. The 2 Minotaur demons shrunk their heads and fell asleep in the corner of the bushes. Today's new item, beggar's chicken. Apart from the enlarged menu at the entrance of the restaurant, there was also a small notice hanging on it. The news of Meg's duel with the Orc brothers at noon had spread like wildfire. The scrumptiousness of the beggar's chicken was even described as something that could only be found in the heavens. It whetted everyone's appetite. Beggar's chicken. What kind of chicken is that? A chicken that melts when it cries. Interesting. I want one. Crassus sat down and flipped through the menu for a while before nodding. His appetite was getting better and better after eating at Mamie's. The meat that he had originally given up on had now become something that he often ordered. Originally, he was worried that he wouldn't be able to teach Amy for long. But now, he was confident that he could train Amy to become the strongest close combat magic caster on the Norland continent. Before that, he wouldn't die. I want one too, Julian said in a hoarse voice as he looked at Crassus. The beggar's chicken is super delicious, but it's a little too much. If the two of you can't finish it, your precious disciple can share some of the burden with you. Amy came forward and blinked her big eyes. She looked like a good disciple who was willing to share her master's burden. Sure. Then little Amy will help me eat half of it, Crassus said with a doting smile. Master Crassus, you're the best. Amy said happily. Another one for little Amy. Julian raised his finger coolly. Even ordering a beggar's chicken made him look like a grandmaster. Wow! Master Julian, I love you. Amy's eyes were already lit up with little stars. Give me 10 more for Amy's supper. Crassus looked at Julian and pursed his lips. 10. This is too blissful. Amy clasped her little hands together with a blissful face. This is a beggar's chicken that costs 1,500 copper coins each. Is money a joke? What do you know? These two are the legendary great magicians, the Lord of Ice and the Lord of Fire. What's the big deal about buying 10 roast chickens? Is it more important than little boss happiness? I'm so envious. I also want to have such a master. My master only knows how to snatch my drumsticks to eat. The customers looked at this scene with envy. At the same time, they were worried that the two magicians would fight and order all the beggars' chicken for the day. If that happened, they would have nothing to eat. But no one dared to say anything. They were legendary great magicians. Would anyone dare to snatch the roast chicken from them? Meg, who was in the kitchen, looked at this scene and walked out helplessly. He looked at Amy and said, "Amy, you're full for tonight. You're not allowed to eat anymore." "All right." Amy shrugged with slight disappointment. She looked at Crassus and Julian, shook her head, and said, "Masters, please treat me next time." As night fell, the customers dispersed, and the lively Amy's also returned to its peaceful state. A gust of cold wind blew, and a Tauren sneezed. He raised his head and looked around in confusion. His eyes widened, and he kicked another Tauren's butt. "Idiot! Get up quickly. It's time to act." Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1043. When the two Taurens arrived in front of Amy's, it was already late at night and there were no pedestrians on the streets. They didn't know how long they had slept. "Big idiot, the door is closed, how are we going to do it? Why don't we find a place to sleep and wait until the sun rises?" Two Idiot rubbed his eyes and yawned. "That's true." Big Idiot nodded, but quickly shook his head and said, "No, the king said that he would only give us 3 days. We have already spent a day on the way here. If we don't kidnap him out of the city today, we won't be able to make it back in time." "Then what do you think we should do?" "The door is already closed." Two Idiot said anxiously. "We're not here to eat. Who cares if the door is closed or not, we can just kick it open. It's so late at night, it's easier to kidnap him." Big Idiot patted Two Idiot's head and laughed. "That's true." Two Idiot nodded with a smile. He looked around and saw that there was no one around. He walked to the door and kicked it open. The door of the restaurant was just a wooden door. It didn't look very sturdy. He was a level 4 Tauren demon, so he could kick 10 of them away with one kick. Big Idiot watched from the side. The king sent the 2 of them to catch a human chef. It was a waste of talent. They couldn't even get a good night's sleep. When Two Idiot kicked the wooden door, it was as if he had kicked a piece of iron. The wooden door didn't budge, but his leg was a little numb from the impact. "This wooden door is made of iron." Two Idiot was stunned and muttered. "Two Idiot, did you not eat? You can't even kick open this broken door." Big Idiot looked at Two Idiot whose leg was still stuck to the door and laughed. He reached out to push Two Idiot away. Detected level 4 attack. Analysis: the intruder's strength is too low. Threat level is 0. There is no need to inform the host. Activating automatic defense system. Activating reflect, 10 times the damage. A line of small words flashed through Meg's mind. A green light flashed on the wooden door. Two Idiot, who was about to retract his right leg, felt a terrifying force coming from his leg. It was as if he had been kicked, and his body turned into a parabola and smashed into the grass 30 meters away. "Ouch!" Two Dumb screamed. Big Dumb blinked his eyes. He still hadn't recovered from what had just happened. Two Dumb kicked the door and sent himself flying. Hearing Two Dumb scream, he quickly turned and ran towards Two Dumb. Two Dumb. Big Dumb dragged Two Dumb out of the bushes. Looking at his deformed right leg, he couldn't help but be shocked. "Two Dumb, what are you doing? You son of a bitch, how did you end up like this?" "That door, it kicked me." Two Dumb covered her leg and said in pain. "Let me take a look for you." Big Dumb squatted down, and after a while, he successfully broke Two Dumb's broken leg. This should be better, right? Big Fool stood up, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and looked at the pale-faced Two Fool. Yes, the pain is clearer now. Two Dumb nodded. That's good. Big Fool heaved a sigh of relief. He picked up a large rock from the side and angrily walked towards Amy's. Son of a bitch, how dare you hurt my brother? See if I don't smash your broken door. Clang! The rock hit the door, and made a dull thud. Then, that rock hit Big Dumb's head at an even faster speed, and brought him back to Two Dumb's side. Big Dumb, are you alright? Two Dumb asked Two Dumb in a panic while lying down. I'm alright. Is my head still on my neck that you touched? Two Dumb asked dizzily. Your head is still there. It's just that pair of horns. Two Dumb looked at the remaining half of Big Dumb's horn on his head, and gulped. Your horns are gone, what? My horns. Big Dumb's eyes widened as he saw the broken half of his horn beside him. His eyes rolled back, and he fainted immediately. Big Dumb. Big Dumb. Two Dumb crawled over and patted Big Dumb's face. He looked in the direction of the restaurant with a long face. This broken door has a spirit. I have to report this to the king. Roth Empire, in the royal palace. In a magnificent palace, the king of the Roth Empire sat on the throne. Below him stood the first prince, Sean, and the second prince, Josh. There were only 3 people in the entire palace. The 3 most honorable people of the Roth Empire, the current ruler, and the future ruler, were all standing here today. The king looked at the 2 of them, and calmly asked, in 2 months, the 8 major races will be negotiating a new peace agreement. How do you think the Roth Empire should negotiate? Sean glanced at Josh, and cupped his hands. I think that after 100 years of development, the Roth Empire's power has already far surpassed the other races, and is only weaker than the giant dragons. We should not continue to sign this peace agreement. Instead, we should take this opportunity to expand the Roth Empire's territory to the entire Norland continent. The king's expression did not change, but his grip on the 2 round beads tightened slightly. I don't agree with royal brother. Josh took a step forward, and said to the king, Royal father, although the Roth Empire's national power has been strong all these years, and far surpasses the ordinary races, it's not fashionable to say that we have already dominated the Norland continent. Although the giant dragons are a pile of loose sand and are nothing to be afraid of, they will definitely not sit back and watch us dominate the Norland continent. Furthermore, in recent years, there have been many alliances between the various races. If the Roth Empire were to go to war with 2 races at the same time, it would be very difficult for us to win. I think it's too early to talk about unifying the Norland continent now. We should renew the peace talks this time, but we have to redraw the territories. Given the power of our Roth Empire, we should have more land. Those weaker races should give in if they don't want to go through another war among species. Subduing the enemy without fighting is the best outcome. Sean looked at Josh mockingly and said, territory is not something that can be obtained just by talking about it. Even those goblins hiding underground will not give up their territory so easily. War is the only way to redraw the Norland continent's territory. The Roth Empire's iron hooves will trample all enemies. The number of wizards in the Magus Tower is increasing rapidly, and their power has also increased rapidly in the past few years. Give them some more time, and they will become the Empire's strongest combat power. Josh looked at Sean, and also argued back. All right. The king's low voice interrupted the 2's argument. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he revealed a smile. Both of you seem to have forgotten about someone. Sean's and Josh's expressions changed slightly. Obviously, they had not forgotten. Tomorrow, I will announce to the world that as long as he returns to the Roth Empire, he will become the commander of the military. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, the mobile version of this book, .com. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure. Oh.